So as of me talking, there have been 40 WrestleManias, and because we are nerds deep down in our tum-tums, sometimes you do look off into the distance and think to yourself, what are the greatest moments in WrestleMania history? Now, of course, everybody is going to have their individual favorites, and nostalgia plays a part, and there is such a thing as recency bias. If you've just seen something and it does make you go nuts in your brain, well, that's going to be right at the surface of your body. Of course, the biggest task with this list is trying to eliminate personal taste as much as possible. But let's be honest, when we wake up tomorrow, some of these also may have changed. So we do not expect you to agree, but we would love you to share your thoughts in the comments below. But otherwise, I am Simon Miller, and the rest of WhatCulture Wrestling will join you too. And these are the 100 greatest WWE WrestleMania moments. Number 100, double doinks at WrestleMania 9. So of course I would start with some goofy wrestling for life, but I can't help it. And also, when it comes to Matt Bourne, the man who played the original Doink the Clown, there is more beneath the surface. Because if you do go back and watch the original incarnation, this isn't a tee isn't this guy being stupid character. He made this clown prince an absolute terror. I suppose it was a little bit like the Joker come to life in the world of professional wrestling. You could probably argue that his peak did come at WrestleMania 9 when his heated grudge match against Crush was on the card, and I bet Jim Ross loved this. It was his debut for the then World Wrestling Federation, and as we know, he wasn't totally into the tomfoolery. Now we do have to go back to 1993, and yeah, Crush was getting super over, especially with younger WWF fans. Vince McMahon and co really did sink some story into this as well, and when the two did lock up in Las Vegas, well, they had some damn good chemistry. Everybody then freaked out as well, because just as this did get going, we looked into the ring, and not only did we see one doink, but we saw two. All of a sudden, we got a little bit scared that we'd got drunk. This wasn't the case though, and it was part of the narrative, and if you care, the second doink was being played with none other than Steve Kern, who would also go on to be Skinner. It was a very weird time. Of course, the idea here is that they did trade places, not only bamboozling the ref, but also Randy Savage, Jim Ross, and Bobby Heenan on commentary, who absolutely were amazed at what they were seeing. And no, this was never going to get to the main event, and really was just on the show to put a smile on your face. But a good concept is a good concept, and this was very well thought out. It's also something I've remembered for the last 30 or so years. So fine, if you want to turn up your nose at it, that makes perfect sense. But a bit of double doink goodness is good for the soul. Number 99, LOD 2000 arrives at WrestleMania 14. So yes, very sadly, we do have to address the elephant in the room, the fact that WWF called the brand new Legion of Doom LOD 2000. You know the deal, it was the turn of the millennium, which is why Chris Jericho wasn't just Chris Jericho, he was Mr. Y2J. I don't think anybody thought into the future. It was also the same with the fact we had the Dudleys and the Hardys, and in case you don't know, they were not spelt with S's, and we used a Z. Once again, we may as well just move on. Now, it was great to see Hawk and Animal back because they were one of the best tag teams of all time, but rather than rely on the fact we'd had classic Road Warriors for a long old while, we did put a fresh coat of paint on them, and man, it was the coolest thing you ever saw in your life. Because the pair had new spiked shoulder pads and just had this extra glossy sheen about them, and of course their manager was now Sonny. That didn't really make any sense when you broke it down, but if wrestling is meant to be an aesthetic business, these three together look great. Young fans who may not have been aware of the Legion of Doom's past also went crazy for this because, again, they look like badasses. Sometimes sports entertainment can be that simple. This WrestleMania also opened with a 15-team battle royal, which is when Animal and Hawk did return. And I'm pretty sure the whole match was built around them. They just destroyed everyone and used their power. There was a little bit of irony towards the finish too, because who did LOD 2000 throw out to win this thing? It was the New Midnight Express that was consisted of Bombastic Bob Holly and Bodacious Bart Gunn. I don't want to be horrible, but they were just a little bit crap. As soon as the whole what a rush hits during their entrance music as well, you can feel the energy. So I don't know who came up with this, but you get a massive pat on the back. It was all-time stuff. Number 98, ECW comes to the Grandest stage at WrestleMania 23. So if you do indeed like to partake in late 90s WWF Attitude Era, there is no two ways about it. They took huge inspiration from Paul Heyman's ECW. And even if somebody tells you different, they're probably lying. Even though there was this crossover, however, it wouldn't actually be until 2007 when ECW hit WrestleMania properly, because on that night we had the originals of Rob Van Dam, the Sandman, Sabu, and Tommy Dreamer. and they were taking on the New Breed. Probably don't remember the New Breed, but that's okay. It was Matt Striker, Kevin Thorne, Marcus Corvon, and Elijah Burke. The only real shame is that this was basically the old Extreme Championship Wrestling versus the WWE's version of it. And when we talk about the latter, you do have to be a bit sad, because we didn't really execute it in the way that we had envisioned. Even RVD has talked about this. He didn't think it was all that great. It also meant that if you were drawn into this because you were an old school fan, you probably felt a little bit 50-50. But look, you did get 4 ECW legends on a WrestleMania, and can you believe it? They actually won. That was a massive surprise, but of course on this night, Vince McMahon was also getting ready to have his Battle of the Billionaires with Donald Trump. So I can only assume he was distracted and somebody snuck this through. Hopefully Paul Heyman. Given that the likes of Rob Van Dam, the Sandman Sabu, and Tommy Dreamer, though, were never going to make it properly in the World Wrestling Federation, which of course now was WWE, it just felt like a wonderful moment all round. And it just goes to show. Sports entertainment is a funny old thing, and if you do keep your foot in the game, well, eventually you are going to get your big moment. Number 97, Rocky Maivia's early bloodline moment at WrestleMania 13. So if you are a brand new wrestling fan or one from the last 5 years, you will know that ever since 2020, the bloodline has been everywhere. A huge reason we have been able to keep this going is because the family lineage stretches back decades. It's why we're able to talk about the likes of the Wild Samoans and Rikishi and of course now Roman Reigns and the Usos. But you also get The Rock and The Rock's father Rocky Johnson, because they can be linked to the Samoan clan after marrying into it. It's also why now when you go back through WrestleManias, WrestleMania 13 in 1997 stands out like a sore thumb. Because who was a fresh-faced babyface Rocky Maivia successfully defending his Intercontinental title against? Well, it was the flipping Sultan, who, by the way, just so happened to be played by Rikishi. In terms of a moment that is far more casual too, after the match, the Sultan's managers Bob Backlund and Iron Sheik do attack Rocky. So who comes out to make the save? It's his old dad, Rocky Johnson. His old dad, it's just his dad. Well, this was done to pop the crowd as well. As we all know today, it did not work out in the long run. Rocky was soon getting booed by everybody, and by WrestleMania 13, I think the higher-ups knew this, hence why they tried to go, but look, they're a family, and they're so damn happy. Before long, we were going to turn him heel, but actually that's why this does have a little bit more gravitas. It's nice that they were able to do it. And no, there is no need to ever watch this match outside of the fact it's awesome seeing The Rock in his younger days. But I just think personally this must have meant a lot to everybody. You also should pretend that Rikishi never played the Sultan, because I can just sum it up for you in a few words. That was a really terrible gimmick. Number 96, Chyna's last hurrah at WrestleMania 17. So nobody knew in 2001 that WrestleMania 17 was going to be Chyna's last, and we have said this a few times on these videos. If anybody did deserve a second run, it was Joni Lawler. It's a massive shame that she never got to do it. I certainly don't think what we're about to talk about would have got into the moments if it was not for everything that did happen after this, but because it was the last time she was able to wave the WWF flag, well, it does have a certain emotion attached to it. I'm also saw management assume the Ninth Wonder of the World would appear on countless supercards in the future, because here she does take on Ivory for the Women's Championship, and she absolutely crushes her. I mean, she becomes the champion in around about 2 minutes. This all does tie into the bigger story that does have to be told, though, and that is although Chyna wanted to keep working with the men, after she had sat down with Jim Ross and other people a part of the hierarchy, they felt like she needed to go back to the women's division, because there was only so much they could do. Now, of course, that was always going to raise some eyebrows because Chyna had not only won the men's Intercontinental title, but also been in the Royal Rumble. And yes, it was this discrepancy that saw them go their separate ways, and they never did business together again. Given all the doors that Chyna opened, though, and the fact that she did win the championship on this night too, well, I do think it has to be celebrated. Ivory also deserves a shout out as well for just being such a professional. So while this match isn't really much to talk about, seeing Chyna with that gold wrapped around her waist, well, it will make you feel warm and fuzzy in your tum-tum. Number 95, the Hart Foundation's Killer Squash at WrestleMania 6. So many wouldn't have been expecting to see this jump make the cut, but it is here in full pink and black attack glory, because that's the colours the Hart Foundation wore. I'm very sorry. WrestleMania 6 is also one of those WrestleManias where everybody just wanted to talk one match, which is how the WWF was able to burn through 14 bouts on the main card, and yes, that's totally redonkulous. The thing is, one of them just lasted 19 seconds, which was the Hart Foundation crushing the Bolsheviks. So if you were a fan of Bret Hart and Jimmy Anvil Neidhart, well, all of a sudden they felt like the coolest people on the planet. It also came after Neidhart had cut off Nikolai Volkov's rendition of the Russian International National Anthem, and as soon as he was thrown out of the ring, poor Boris Zukov then got absolutely murked, and yeah, the Hart Foundation absolutely won this in record time. I think Bret knew the deal as well, because during the 3 count he thrust his finger into the camera lens, and if you were a very young wrestling fan, this was probably the first time you thought to yourself, oh my gosh, the Hitman is super duper whooper cool. 1 year after this too, the Hart Foundation were going to split, and what did Bret Hart do from then? Well, he went on one of the best singles run in pro wrestling history. To go back to the goofy wrestling for life element of it too, before all this, we do have to give bonus points to comedian Steve Allen, who did indeed interview the Bolsheviks backstage. For some reason, Allen had a piano in the showers and deliberately played wrong tunes, as Nikolai and Boris just got really mad. So yeah, if you are into old school wrestling and an idea of the playful, but also followed up by an absolute squash, you should go and watch this. It will make you go nuts. Number 94, John Cena proposes to Nikki Bella at WrestleMania 33. So WrestleMania 33 now, when you go back to it, feels like it happened in a parallel universe. I mean, for one, WWE finally understood what to do with Bill Goldberg, even though they'd had 20 years to get it right. Shane McMahon also has one of the best singles matches of the evening against AJ Styles. And then you also have a very warm and fuzzy in your tum-tum moment, because after taking on The Miz and Maurice, John Cena and Nikki Bella got engaged. I mean, this is the most soap opera thing ever. Now, obviously, the two weren't able to last and they have broken up, but you need to forget about that. If you can focus on this evening, well, fans absolutely love the fact that John and Nikki were doing this. We all knew about their relationship, and now we were able to see it play out in real time. There had been a bunch of rumors before this too, with some people not being sure what to expect. But when Cena did get down on one knee and asked Nikki to marry him, well, I guess it kind of reminded you of what the WWF did with Randy Savage and Miss Elizabeth. This was totally real as well, because the wedding was planned before they did split up in April 2018. But does that take away from the historical value of the moment? I say no. It's also a little bit more special as well, because The Miz and Maurice were so damn good in the build-up to this. So you can sit down, you can watch all the videos, you can watch all the vignettes, and if you are just focusing on this WrestleMania, well, it ends in a lovely moment. I tell you, my friends, that's what life is all about. Number 93, Sable shows her chops at WrestleMania 14. So before the likes of Lita and Trish Stratus grabbed it by the horns, it's fair to say that for a good old while, the WWE did not know what to do when it came to women's wrestling, and some of it was downright appalling. Before this did kick into gear though, we did have moments where we were like, wait a minute, maybe we can do something. And one of these absolutely has to be Sable's performance at the 1998 WrestleMania. Once again, we had a mixed tag team match on that show, because she teamed with husband Mark Mero to take on Luna Vachon and Goldust. And honestly, on paper and on the internet wrestling community forums, everybody thought this was going to go south. After all, the rhetoric had always been that Sable had only been hired for her looks. And also, this was just a crazy bout. I mean, where on earth did it come from? Clearly, though, Sable had heard this and decided she was going to prove everybody wrong, because not only does she fire up throughout WrestleMania 14, but she just cut such an intense figure. You can also tell that Luna understands the assignment, because she bumps her ass off, and Mero and Goldust make sure they bring professionalism to this match too. You would have seen the end finish over and over again in countless video packages after the fact, because Sable's match-winning powerbomb and TKO combo, which also just so happened to be Mark Mero's finished, genuinely shocked the world. She looked really good. I suppose she was helped in the sense that actually everybody else in the match was a bad guy. Mark Mero was not a nice individual at this point, and because of that, the fans rallied behind her. That will only take you so far though, and Sable proved she was meant to do this. Wasn't just a flash in the pan, and I tell you, given we have had so many WrestleManias, there are way worse matches than this one. And in fact, it is pretty damn good. Number 92, Bobby Heenan and a camel at WrestleMania 9. So because WrestleMania 9 was going to be located in Vegas and come from Caesar's Palace, Vince McMahon decided, well, you know what? We should all dress up in togas and really lean into this theme. Poor Jim Ross has already talked about debuted on this show and felt like a right idiot. But as always, Bobby Heenan saw it and thought, you know what? I can make this the funniest thing anyone has ever done in sports entertainment. It meant as soon as the decision had been made that he was going to arrive into the building on a camel, Heenan's brain, ironically, kicked into gear, and just before he was meant to go through the curtain, do you know what he did? He decided to mount it facing the wrong way. Naturally, the whole time, Bobby was yelling at the animal to make him look like an idiot, and by the time he flopped off onto his back, well, it just reminded you, My gosh, Bobby Heenan, you're one of the best performers of all time. The camera occasionally cuts to Randy Savage and JR, who quite clearly are trying to keep straight faces. And how Heenan was able to do any of this without hurting himself, I don't know. He falls a long ass way. The word has always been that within the gorilla position, people were just laughing away too. And really, that was the Brain's strong point. He just got it. And at one point, even shouted out, "How do I stop this camel?" As soon as he sat down at the commentary desk too, he pretended that he had it all in check. And I tell you, his humor, his comedy timing, I'm not sure we've ever seen anybody else like him. 91, the Gimmick Battle Royal at WrestleMania 17. So, of course, I was going to bring this one up because in terms of moment, it may have my number one. It was the last known appearance, as of me talking to you, of the legend and the hero known as Repo Man. Now, of course, one of the reasons I did love it so much is because I'm obsessed with the Repo Man, but that's why this had something for everyone if you were into nostalgic wrestling. Because check out this list of warriors that did make an appearance. The Bushwhackers, Duke Drozy, Doink the Clown, Nikolai Volkov, Tugboat, The Goon, Earthquake, The Gobbledygooker, Brother Love, Michael Hayes, One Man Gang, Kamala, Kimchi, Jim Cornette, Sergeant Slaughter, Hillbilly Jim, and the Flipping Iron Sheik. You also have Bobby Heenan on commentary when Bobby has the best line in the history of WrestleMania. By the time the Iron Sheik gets to the ring, it will be WrestleMania 38. It really was well thought out though, especially when you look at where it was in the card. This Battle Royal bridged the gap between TLC 2 and The Undertaker vs. Triple H, meaning fans could just chill out for a little while and laugh their asses off. The absolute highlight is the only reason the Iron Sheik won is because he had been told by medical professionals that he was physically incapable of taking a bump and talking to the floor. I wouldn't have wanted it to go any other way then, because that just brings so much joy to my heart. Also, because if you want to sit down and pretend the Iron Sheik made it up, you absolutely can. He was one hell of a worker. I shall now leave you in the good hands of Andy Murray, but I shall join you later. And always remember that WrestleMania is the best.
Thank you very much, Mr. Miller. And what better way to tag in from the best guy ever than by talking about the other best guy ever. Number 90, Bobby Heenan's commentary comeback at WrestleMania 17. Think of this as a little companion entry to the previous one, but I think it deserves its own spot as well. The then WWF brought Bobby Heenan and Mean Gene Okerlund back for commentary duties during the previously examined Gimmick Battle Royal at WrestleMania 17. The timeless banter between the two worked an absolute treat, and it was quite clear that Gene, in particular, had probably been enjoying a few cocktails backstage while waiting for his spot. But no harm done, that only warmed the pair up and made them even funnier. And besides, it wasn't exactly like they had to be razor sharp anyway. This was a match filled with older stars who could barely move around the ring, or in the case of the Iron Sheik, take any bumps whatsoever. So Bobby and Gene had an absolute blast as they ripped everyone to shreds and reminisced about the days of yore. Jim Ross once told a pretty sweet story about all of this on his podcast. He said that he and Paul Heyman had a rare chance to run backstage for a toilet break between matches because obviously the legends were taking over, but neither of them wanted to move from ringside. JR said that he wanted to sit next to Heenan and Okerlund all night so that he could just listen to what they were saying. There's something unbelievably cool about that. One of wrestling's greatest commentators ever is a fan just like you. This was one for the nostalgia buffs out there, but it also gave everybody a brief respite from the tension of high-stakes matches, and that was sorely needed at WrestleMania 17. It's one of the best WrestleManias of all time, if not the best. And actually, the Gimmick Battle Royal, the big dumb fun of it all, is a big part of that, and it wouldn't have been anywhere near as special without Bobby the Brain and Mean Gene. Number 89, The Undertaker's streak begins, WrestleMania 7. The Undertaker's earliest days in WWE were hardly renowned for in-ring quality. The gimmick was about more than pure matches, of course, but Undertaker himself has admitted that it was a relief to dispense with the zombie style and speed things up a little bit during the mid to late 90s. But back in 1991, he moved at the pace of an aging sloth. But at least he did so on purpose. That made his WrestleMania bow opposite Jimmy Snuka fairly inconsequential at the time. Nobody was talking about this one after the show, let's get that straight, but it would become historically significant once the Undertaker's legendary streak became part of WWE's product. So it's pretty important to look back on how things started. Everything and everybody has to start somewhere, and Taker's streak couldn't begin without a few routine wins to kick it off. Maybe the most interesting thing here was that nobody knew what kind of relationship the Dead Man would go on to build with WrestleMania going forward. He was just Vince McMahon's latest monster at the time, who looked likely to be chewed up and spat out by Hulk Hogan and never really thought of again. That didn't happen in the the end, Undertaker proved that he belonged on the WWE roster, and he defied expectations to play the gimmick and build the streak over 20-odd years. Beating a waning big name as well in the form of Jimmy Snuka gave Undertaker a cracking start on his journey towards immortality. Yeah, it's not the best match of all time, even for the standards of the era, but it can't be ignored as a valuable component of The Undertaker's career. Number 88, WrestleMania Goes Hardcore, WrestleMania 17. Hey look, it's the mayor of Knoxville County, Tennessee, and he's driving a golf cart after tossing Raven through a window. Those were just some of the madcap spots that Kane, Raven, and Big Show had up their sleeves for their hardcore title roadshow at WrestleMania 17. People there live didn't even mind watching most of it on big screens because they understood that the hardcore division's slapstick appeal and total brand of chaos meant that these guys just had to go mental for about 10 minutes. As legend has it, Raven accidentally ran over some key cabling backstage in his own golf buggy that almost knocked the entire building's power out. That could have been pretty awkward and would have led to Vince McMahon repeating the age-old question, who hired Raven? Thankfully, the power ended up holding out and the pay-per-view marched on following this bizarre hardcore thriller. Raven's job was safe, but his body wasn't. All three of these dudes beat the snot out of one another. They were going through windows, going through walls, Little John all over the place. And admittedly, it was slightly odd to see former world champions like Kane and the Big Show battle for the hardcore title, but there's a case to be made that their star power actually elevated this thing's importance for a while. Kane didn't care about rank, and he celebrated in the end like he'd won the main event. And he should have, because the hardcore title kinda rocked, and so did this match. There isn't much more to say about the match other than this. Go and watch it if you haven't, or if you haven't since 2001, 100%. Sit down with some popcorn and an ice cold beverage if you've never had the pleasure. This was as good as the hardcore title ever got on WWE's biggest stage, and it defines big dumb fun. Number 87, Steamboat still has it, WrestleMania 25. WWE originally had the brainwave of wanting to book Mickey Rourke, the actor, in a one-on-one match with Chris Jericho for WrestleMania 25. This didn't happen because the actor's management team weren't exactly keen on the idea, but the publicity stunt made a little bit more sense then than it does now. Rourke, of course, had starred as Randy the Ram Robinson in smash hit movie The Wrestler, and he'd earned plaudits for how convincing he looked in that role, so the idea of him taking a acted wrestling role and making it a real wrestling role, yeah, that kind of makes sense. But WWE just could not make it happen, so instead they switched to Jericho bashing actual grappling legends instead. He started ridiculing the likes of Ric Flair, Roddy Piper, Jimmy Snuka, and Ricky Steamboat heading into the big night, then agreed to wrestle the latter trio there in a handicap match. Predictably, Flair tried to steal the show, and neither Piper nor Snuka proved very mobile at all. I mean, they were really old, so fair enough. Steamboat, on the other hand, turned the clock back all the way to 1987. He looked like he hadn't missed a step, and even though he himself was pretty damn old, he turned WrestleMania 25 into one of the most surprising performances we've ever seen on the grandest stage. Ricky was so good, in fact, that WWE even brought him back for another singles match with Jericho on Backlash. There's no way that would have happened had he not put in such a strong performance at Mania. And afterwards, Jericho ended up challenging Mickey Rourke again, and he ate a big old punch for his troubles. Then the Nature Boy celebrated with a few hearty woos, and yeah, there was plenty of that going on too. But it wasn't Mickey Rourke, Chris Jericho, and Ric Flair that were on the lips of hardcore fans afterwards. No, everybody was talking about Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, brother, and rightly so. He did a tremendous job. Number 86, Trish Stratus turns on Chris Jericho at WrestleMania 20. Say hello to one of WrestleMania's wackiest undercard stories. Chris Jericho and Christian got the ball rolling by placing a laddish bet on who could woo Trish Stratus. Lita was involved as well, but most of the focus was put on Trish. It wasn't long before Y2J started to get genuine feelings for Stratus, however, and the heartfelt tenderness shown there would be used against the Canadian when the two other Canadians screwed him over at the pay-per-view. And look, yeah, this is pure soap opera and very much of its time. You probably wouldn't see many storylines like this today. The match between Jericho and Christian was actually pretty technically robust. Little touches like a ticked off Jericho holding onto his walls of Jericho a little bit longer than necessary really added to the spectacle. Then, come the finish, Stratus accidentally, quote unquote, caused Jericho to lose. Heartbroken and searching for answers, Y2J's nightmare would spring to life when Trish slapped the hell out of him, then made out with his best friend on the stage in front of the entire world. Commentators, of course, let Trish had it because that's just kind of what they did when it came to stories like this. And yeah, look, very much of a different time this story storyline, but it's on this list for a reason. As aged as it is, it was a prominent use of all three workers when they could have easily been placed in a nothing battle royal. And yeah, there was lots of overstuffed tag team bouts on this show as well, so it does stand out. Number 85, the Hollywood Backlot Brawl. Look, this is not a good match, but in terms of historical landmarks, we have to talk about it. WWE boss Vince McMahon had nixed a plan for a Miami street fight between Razor Ramon and Goldust when the former made it pretty clear that he didn't want to work with the latter. They'd already wrestled at the Royal Rumble, but Razor did not fancy another pay-per-view versus Goldust, so McMahon ended up changing course. Roddy Piper stepped in at the last minute, and the bout was reframed as a Hollywood Backlot Brawl. One that used footage of O.J. Simpson being pursued by the police between fight scenes, because I don't know, wrestling can be pretty weird sometimes, man. This match kind of summarizes where WWE was heading at the time, that being firmly in the direction of shock jock wrestling, an era of Russoisms and attitude predicated on moments like Piper stripping Goldust down to his lingerie, giving him a low blow, and Goldust running away. It's one of the most controversial matches in WWE history for a reason. Months before this, Bret Hart being put through a table at Survivor Series was about as wild and violent as the Fed got. Now, here was Goldust trying to run Roddy over in a bloody car before flopping around in his underwears. And according to Bruce Pritchard, Rowdy Roddy had pitched beating the heck out of O.J. Simpson live on air as well, which probably would have been pretty damn cathartic, to be honest, but the promotion didn't want to touch something that was still being debated in real life courtrooms, which, yeah, I mean, that's probably for the best. Number 84, Lawrence Taylor stuns the world, WrestleMania 11. By his own admission, WWE champion Diesel was pretty pissed off that his match with Shawn Michaels was relegated to the penultimate spot on the card at WrestleMania 11. NFL great Lawrence Taylor was brought in to work a celeb versus wrestler main event with Bam Bam Bigelow, so Diesel versus HBK, that had to be going second last. That was pretty frustrating, but even members of the clique had to put their hands up after the fact and admit that LT worked out in the headlining position. Of course, Bam Bam takes a lot of the praise for that. He was the glue holding this main event together, but Taylor still had to hold up his end of the bargain, man. He had to train pretty damn hard to look even semi-competent in this match, and if he was feeling any pressure heading into it, then he didn't show it on the night. The way Bam Bam made sure to keep things relatively simple for LT while still looking like a killer himself probably should have led to a bigger push for the Beast from the East. WWF tried to turn the Bammer babyface before giving up on him completely after this, which is a shame considering he was one of the best big men to ever do it. Indeed, Taylor versus Bigelow was a remarkable success, all things considered. Even Vince McMahon, who had pinned his hopes on a celebrity attraction drawing casual viewership, couldn't have imagined in his wildest dreams that Lawrence would end up looking as good as he did when the bell rang. WrestleMania 11's headliner raised the bar for celebrity influence on future cards, but more on that later. Number 83, Andre the Giant wins his Battle Royal, WrestleMania II. WWE don't make a lot of noise about the importance of the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal before each WrestleMania, but the original created a future trend without even knowing it. At WrestleMania II, Andre entered a WWF versus NFL Battle Royal alongside workers like Bret Hart, Bruno Sammartino, and Pedro Morales, as well as some football names like William Perry, Russ Francis, and Ernie Holmes. The hope was that casual sports fans would tune in to see their gridiron favorites tangling in the ring, while WWF sneakily booked themselves to appear superior to real-world sports. Fair enough, it was their playground, not the NFL's. Andre the Giant will forever inspire awe due to his jaw-dropping size and sheer aura, the sheer mystique surrounding such a huge man performing athletic moves like dropkicks in his prime. By 1986, he'd slowed down quite a lot, so this Battle Royal was created partly so he'd have something to do on the biggest show of the year. In turn, it became known as his match. But I'd also like to use this entry to encourage everyone out there to go out of their way and watch more Andre the Giant. He is a man unfairly typecast because his most famous match, against Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania III, is basically a body slam and a bear hug. But even that match was everything it needed to be at the time, and if you go back in time and watch some of Andre's older material, you will fall in love with one of the coolest wrestlers of all time. I personally recommend his 1981 match with Stan Hansen. But anyway, soapbox over. Entry number 82 is Hulk Hogan survives the steel cage at WrestleMania II. A lot of older fans, and I'm one of them, will probably be a bit annoyed at seeing an early WrestleMania moment like this, a classic, be so low on the top 100 list. But such things are typically viewed through a nostalgic lens. revisit the single-digit WrestleManias today and you'll see just how far WWE has come in terms of blending presentation, match quality, and more. Now that isn't to say that everything old is somehow bad, but this is good. That's why it's on the list. At Mania II, poster boy Hulk Hogan stepped into the old blue-barred steel cage for a match against the latest monster waiting for him to put down. King Kong Bundy was the guy. Aura was about all that he had. And size, he was a big dude. And also bald, so good stuff, brother. Looking out for you. As a wrestler, bell to bell, Bundy was pretty limited, but he was at least a realistic threat to Hulkamania, which is probably why there was such a spark of interest in seeing if Hulk Hogan could overcome this monster while locked inside a steel cage. It would be foolish to put this moment any higher, but it would also be foolish to leave it out completely. So there you go, Hogan versus Bundy in that blue old cage that looked like it hurt like hell. Number 81, WrestleMania goes Jackass at WrestleMania 38. Many an eye was rolled when Jackass star Johnny Knoxville entered the men's 2022 Royal Rumble and lasted about 90 seconds before being eliminated by Sami Zayn. What was the point? Cynics bleated. Couldn't that spot have gone to a full-time roster member? Other people complained. Both of them were valid questions, but Johnny's seemingly pointless Rumble cameo led to one of the best comedy matches and one of the best celebrity matches in WrestleMania history. Probably the best. Knoxville versus Sami Zayn on WrestleMania 38's second night was 1,000,000 times better than anyone could have comprehended. Their anything goes stipulation meant that other members of the Jackass collective could get involved as well, and essentially this match turned into a live action episode of the old MTV show. Sami Zayn went out of his way to make himself look like a complete and utter clown as well. Sometimes it's the matches you least expect to rule that legitimately do, and Sami was on fire when falling for every basic Jackass style stunt just because he was blinded by his rage for Johnny Knoxville. WWE going full Jackass as late as 2022 should not have worked. I mean, sure, they had a new movie out, but they were at least 15 years past their sell-by date as a pop culture phenomenon. But the cool thing is that nobody really cared about that at WrestleMania. Everybody in the audience became a 15-year-old again, watching MTV at the break of night. That doesn't even make any sense, but that's how cool this match was. And both participants understood the assignment fully, and they went the goofy route. And good luck to anyone who thinks they can be as funny and as enjoyable as this on WrestleMania anytime in the future. But hey, speaking of funny and enjoyable, here's Gareth Morgan.
Cheers, Mighty Murray. Now it's time for my first ever WrestleMania moment. It's about damn time. Number 80, Hulk beats Mr. McMahon, WrestleMania 19. It'll come as no shocker to most that Hulk Hogan's fab 2002 Mania return ranks higher than his 2003 match. However, Hogan going toe-to-toe with the man who helped create his marketing might was some selling point for 19. One of several. WWE pitched Hulk versus Mr. McMahon as a fight almost 20 years in the making. It happened just shy of 2 full decades after McMahon had booked Hogan to win his WWF title for the first time. Now, people knew what they'd be getting from a Vince match by the time 03 dawned, but he was taking a risk by working a featured bout with someone who couldn't move around a whole lot. Hulk's knees were already shot to pieces, brother. So both men knew they'd have to lace their match with some bells and whistles. And one of those bells and whistles was an invading Roddy Piper. He wasn't so much Team McMahon as he was anti-Hogan here, but even the rowdy one couldn't stop Hulkamania from putting Vince in his place. This was also a rare occasion when the dreaded retirement gimmick actually made sense for once. It was not far-fetched to think that Hogan was on his last legs, or knees by this stage in the game, and it did seem like a full circle moment to bow out against McMahon, win or lose anyway. 3 big leg drops hammered home a victory for Hulk that had the live crowd leaping off their seats to cheer him on. Oh, how times have changed. But it was still a top example of 2 men who understood their limitations but played to their strengths. Number 79, Zack Ryder's IC Dream comes true, WrestleMania 32. WWE lore depicts WrestleMania as the kind of collective viewing experience that brings families together. And at 32, the promotion opened their annual powerhouse with an embrace between teary father and son. It brings a tear to your own eye. Zack Ryder won the Intercontinental title by hauling the belt down in a 7-man ladder match. And things got rather emotional when Daddy Dearest entered the ring for the Cardona clan's very own Mania moment. They'll remember this one forever, guaranteed. Ryder beats Stardust, Sin Cara, Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn, The Miz, and Dolph Ziggler to etch his name into the event's history books permanently. KO was the reigning champ going in, something I always forget for some reason. But WWE's announcers did sterling work to predict that pigs would fly before he successfully retained his prize in the face of staggering odds, and that proved to be true. But few called Zack putting a tick in the win column here. If anything, it seemed far more likely that Zayn or Ziggler would score a win to kick the main card off with a bang. I would have even put Stardust above him. I wonder where he is now. This wouldn't be Ryder's only celebration on the Grandest stage, of course. In 2019, he and real-life pal Kurt Hawkins beat The Revival to win the Raw Tag Team belts. That happened on the pre-show though, so he could never really come close to kicking off WrestleMania proper by snaring one of the most prestigious championships going. This had to feel really, really good for Zack, or Matt Cardona as he now prefers to be called, and it was clear that his dad was over the moon when watching his boy flourish from ringside. Again, all the tears. Number 78, Kane tombstones Pete Rose, Mania 14. How about it? Baseball great Pete Rose riled up a seething live crowd in Boston before The Undertaker's first time ever meeting with kayfabe brother Kane at WrestleMania 14. The city's sports daft legion showered Rose with booze as he trolled them with various Red Sox-related jibes. I had no idea what was going on. In his absolute element, Pete hammed it up as he strutted around the ring, mic in hand, like he did this every other week. But what happened next cemented his spot in WWE history. Kane emerged for the match alongside Paul Bearer, then went face-to-face with Rose inside the ring. Selling a bit of fear mixed with overconfidence, Pete didn't exactly back off. So Kane snatched him with a hand around the throat, then thought better of a chokeslam by hitting the MLB legend with a tombstone piledriver instead, as Jim Ross and Jerry Lawler backed hyperbole on commentary. This would become a semi-regular spot on the famous pay-per-view over the next few years. Rose returned at Mania 15 dressed as a chicken, right then, and then he tried to get the best of Kane again at Mania 2000. He did not learn his lesson. Rather regrettably, this didn't lead to the natural Hell in a Cell war between both stars that fans craved. Imagine that. That first tombstone, though, was one of the most unexpectedly brilliant celebrity moments of the entire Attitude Era, and it almost turned Kane babyface before he tangled with Taker. Boston's masses were pretty pleased that he'd walked out to shut Petey's big ol' mouth. Number 77, MSG trolls Brock Lesnar and Goldberg, WrestleMania 20. Look, Brock Lesnar and Bill Goldberg surely would not agree that this is one of Mania's finest 15-minute segments ever, but Steve Austin might. Stone Cold stood in the center of the ring with a big smile on his face as Madison Square Garden's hallowed halls echoed with chants deriding both Brock and Bill. Meanwhile, neither wrestler quite knew what to make of the, frosty response to their powerhouse showdown. Word had leaked that both planned to leave WWE after the event, so New York let them have it. The crowd totally rebelled on Lesnar versus Goldberg to the point that it's become one of WrestleMania's most must-see disasters. You can't take your eyes off it. Chants of "you sold out" and the classic "na na 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 hey goodbye" filled that cherished arena. And at one point, Goldberg even shouted over at Brock, "Screw these people!" But there was zero chance of rescuing the situation, no matter how hard they tried. Austin was the only one in ring with a smile on his chops. You definitely need to see this if you're a newer fan, or just skipped Brock versus Bill because of the circumstances at the time. Yes, they'd more than make up for the nightmare come 2016 and 2017, but 2004's initial clash was Fan Rebellion 101. Somebody really should have seen this coming ahead of time once word got out that both were heading through the exit doors. Oh, maybe someone did, but thought it'd just be funny to see MSG perform a 20,000 strong takedown on two guys who were jumping off at the next stop. Weirdly enough, I loved this match as a kid though, probably because I had no idea what was happening. Number 76, Floyd Mayweather KOs Big Show, WrestleMania 24. Full-blown celeb matches are always a bit of a risk. Mr. T did it, more on him to come. Johnny Knoxville was on top form, and Lawrence Taylor surprised everybody by doing the basics pretty well. But add boxing into the mix and, well, things can get dicey. By 2008, the infamous Brawl for All guff was still relatively fresh fresh in the memory. Sure, it had been a decade or so, but few were gonna let WWE forget the time they thought having pro wrestlers punch each other in the head for real would be top-tier television. Oh man, what were they thinking? Thankfully, the incoming Floyd Mayweather was a renowned pugilist who brought huge casual interest over from the boxing world. He matched up with Big Show at Mania 24, and WWE cleverly tacked on a no disqualification stipulation to ensure this wouldn't be some dry spectacle that'd leave fans feeling punch drunk. In fact, everyone was in for a treat, whether they were a boxing fan or not here. Floyd and Show would make sure of it. Together, they produced a banter-filled and distraction-laden bout that included Floyd bashing Show with a steel chair and removing his gloves so he could grab some brass knuckles to fell the giant. Mayweather had legitimately broken Show's nose during the build. What an image that was. So it was believable that he'd knock the big man out if he had the chance on pay-per-view. And that is exactly what went down. Or more accurately, it was Big Show who went down. And Orlando liked every single bit of it, and no wonder. This was a rip-roaring success of a celeb versus WWE star match that everyone involved could be proud of. Celeb madness done right, baby. And speaking of celebrity appearances at WrestleMania, I want to know right now, who is your favorite ever celebrity to pop up at WrestleMania and do some stuff? It's probably Snoop Dogg at WrestleMania 39, right? He still got it. Number 75, OVW rules WrestleMania 21. Much has been made of WWE's Performance Center and ability to self-produce excellent talents from the ground up via NXT and the newer ID recruitment portal. The company will always cherry-pick fine workers from elsewhere, like the independent scene, TNA, AEW, etc. But being able to have an in-house production line? Yeah, that's a huge plus for Triple H and Shawn Michaels, isn't it? Pre-NXT and PC though, Ohio Valley Wrestling acted as a hotbed for development. The indie territory helped give fledgling stars like John Cena, Batista, Randy Orton, and Brock Lesnar much-needed reps before they reached the bright lights of Raw and SmackDown. And for proof of how well this worked, just check out the final two matches at Mania 21. Cena beat JBL to become WWE champ, and then Batista pinned Triple H to hoist the World Heavyweight title above his head in the true main event. So Cena. OVW had paid out big time for the McMahons, basically. Now at first, it was only Big Dave's moment in the sun that featured in this entry, but that'd probably be a bit unfair to Cena and to OVW's legacy. Less than 5 years before tasting glory on the biggest platform possible, both babyfaces had been striving to improve on small shows in Louisville, Kentucky. Now here they were winning the richest prizes on wrestling's most iconic tentpole show. Who'd have thunk it, eh? This had to be a proud day for those who had worked diligently to coach Cena and Batista in Ohio Valley. WrestleMania closed with back-to-back triumphs that showed how vital a proper developmental program was to WWE's future. And now both of those blokes are taking Hollywood by storm too. Quite the class. Number 74, an IC triple threat rocks the house, WrestleMania 39. It got lost for a good while there, but the workhorse tag has been restored to the beloved Intercontinental title in recent years. Champions like Gunther went a long way towards giving the secondary belt credibility again. But anybody who watched the Austrians work as NXT UK champ knew that main roster fans could rely on him to up the ante and make things whole again. Pretty much every Gunther title defense between June 2022 and April 2024 was, well, majestic. What a time it was. And at WrestleMania 39 in 2023, the Imperium leader faced Sheamus and Drew McIntyre in a triple threat match that looked like being one of those buzzword bangers everyone talks about on paper. On paper is one thing, but how a match fares in execution is most important. And good news, Gunther versus Sheamus versus Drew was a love letter to anyone who puts IC on a pedestal, and I'm one of those people. At 16 minutes in length, it was perfectly formatted. The typical one-in, one-out nature of three-ways in WWE didn't affect anything, because people were eager to see any combination of this hard-as-nails trio belting the crap out of each other. Poor Bianca Belair and Asuka had to try and follow this immediately afterwards too. They did just fine, which speaks to their skills, to be honest. But yeah, they must have been sweating when warming up and seeing what the Intercontinental lads were up to in the squad squared circle, Gunther arrived at Mania. McIntyre's frustrations continued to build, and Sheamus took one step closer to being a respected favorite with more IC title scorchers in his future. Hopefully he gets that strap in the end, eh? Number 73, Hulk Hogan and Mr. T win out WrestleMania I. Time has not been kind to the inaugural WrestleMania as a sit-down watch from beginning to end. Many of the matches on the card failed to properly get going, and the presentation links from a frankly puzzled-looking Lord Alfred Hayes must be seen to be believed. Go and treat yourself after this video. That's okay, because all anyone really talks about today is the MSG setting and the tag team headliner pitting Hulk Hogan and Mr. T versus Roddy Piper and Paul Orndorff. It was chaotic in a good way, but it'd be generous to place this anywhere near the top 50 despite historical value. Piper wasn't sold on working with T, and that is obvious looking back. Although they do further business together in the WWF, it's clear that Hot Rod thought the actor needed to go back to, well, acting as soon as humanly possible. Mr. T was Hulk's buddy though, so he'd stick around as long as Hogan demanded it, brother. There's also no doubting that Hulk and T winning the first ever main event was a banner moment, showing everything that was right about Vince McMahon's marriage of wrestling and mainstream entertainment. Smartly and ever the pro, Piper made sure to get out of the way before the decision, so he'd live to fight Hulkamania another day. All of the pageantry, aided by celebs like Muhammad Ali, Liberace, and Billy Martin, definitely added to the spiciness of the atmosphere inside the garden. Hogan was also nearing his apex as a star attraction, and Roddy was on fire as one of the best heels in the business at the time. Look, this had to be included somewhere or the collection would feel incomplete, wouldn't it? So here it is, let's move on. Number 72, CM Punk laughs as Damian Priest cashes in WrestleMania 40. 2024 will always be remembered for a carnage-filled feud between CM Punk and Drew McIntyre. Injuries did not prevent WWE from telling their story here, nor did they stop Punk from ruining McIntyre's life at WrestleMania 40. The Comeback King sat in on guest commentary for Drew's world title win over Seth Rollins. Then he had a bit of fun at the Scots' expense once McIntyre shoved success right in his face post-match. Drew's inability to resist poking fun at Punk cost him in the end. Punk tripped him up on the announce desk, then attacked him, which led to Damian Priest cashing in his Money in the Bank briefcase to shockingly become the second new champion of the second night's opening segment. Everyone was stunned, and the stupidly great Punk vs McIntyre saga rolled on. A previously jovial Drew was humbled in front of his friends and family at ringside as Priest cashed in and Punk giggled away at the mayhem he had just caused. What a scamp. This was just really strong stuff, and it absolutely deserves a place in any best of look at Mania's most fun moments from over the years. Number 71, Mick Foley's main event dream comes true, WrestleMania 2000. People definitely bought Mick Foley's retirement following a brutal Hell in a Cell loss to arch nemesis Triple H at No Way Out 2000. Foley retired as Cactus Jack, but then he returned around a month later as himself. Linda McMahon reintroduced Mick as the fourth worker in a fatal four-way main event for Hunter's title at Mania. And it'd be a McMahon in every corner. Yay! Linda in Foley's, Vince in The Rock's, Shane in Big Show's, and Stephanie in Triple H's. All of that was background noise though behind the real dangling carrot for old Mick, his first ever WrestleMania main event spot. According to Chris Jericho in one of his books, it was Y2J who was initially slated to bag that fourth slot, but then Foley was brought in instead and Jericho was bumped out of the picture. Lol. And despite being the last name announced, Mick wasn't actually eliminated first. Show stared at the lights following a rock bottom just 5 minutes in, and Foley lasted another while before Triple H smashed him with a pedigree onto a nearby steel chair. Being honest, at this point in his career, the war-weary Foley, Jack, Mankind, Dude Love, whatever you want to call him, would have likely settled for anything so long as he was on the marquee in the featured match at Mania. This was a teenage dream come true for Mrs. Foley's baby boy. He must have thought he had no chance of main eventing Mania after taking the latest of his frightening bumps at No Way Out and saluting fans on the way out. Pro wrestling moves fast though, folks, and it is awesome that Mick finally had his moment after all. He bloody deserved it. Right, I've got my stuff in, now it's over to the always fantastic Pollard for your next chunk of Mania moments.
Thanks for that lovely firm tag, Gareth. The hottest hot tag in their business, brother. Number 70, Triple H makes history. WrestleMania 2000. Yep, time to double up on Mania 2000 goodness with a little history-making moment from the current WWE boss, with Triple H becoming the first heel in WrestleMania history to successfully retain a WWF title. That came when the game pinned The Rock to win that aforementioned four-way, and it also made Trips the first heel to win the final match of the night at WrestleMania. Legendary villains like Roddy Piper, Andre the Giant, Ted DiBiase, Shawn Michaels, and even The Rock himself, none of those as heels had scored a Mania main event win by that point in time. Sure, Yokozuna did beat Bret Hart in the main event of WrestleMania 9, but that famously became the second to last match of the night due to, that Hulk Hogan BS. While some look back and say that Triple H's real-life relationship with Stephanie McMahon saw him sway the booking to get this WrestleMania win, that relationship didn't actually become a proper thing until later in the year. Meaning this Triple H win? Yep, it was very much a Vince McMahon call. Number 69, Undertaker's Johnny Cash entrance, WrestleMania 27. It is a crime that The Undertaker's fabulous entrance to Johnny Cash's Ain't No Grave was later dubbed over for the WWE Network version. Of course, WWE, they didn't want to keep paying the license for that tune, so they later piped in Taker's usual theme, cruelly chipping away at one of WrestleMania's finest ever entrances. It was absolutely chilling to see the dead man come out to Cash back at Mania 27 for the second of his 3 WrestleMania matches against Triple H. To be fair, Triple H, he also had a pretty sweet entrance himself here, coming out to Metallica's For Whom the Bell Tolls. But Undertaker, man, The Undertaker stole the show with his spooky, somber, and atmospheric tribute to the iconic Man in Black, Johnny Cash. As for Cash's version of this classic gospel song, he actually recorded it in 2003, shortly before his passing, but the track, it did not surface until the posthumous release of American 6 in 2010. The mixture of Undertaker's slow walk to the ring, combined with the gravelly voice and tremble of later years Johnny Cash, this was just perfect. And that's not mentioning how apt the Ain't No Grave title was, with Triple H having promised to bury The Undertaker for retiring Shawn Michaels 1 year earlier. Number 68, No Holds Barred, WrestleMania 27. Metallica and Johnny Cash is one thing, but the No Holds Barred match that followed those tunes wasn't too shabby either. Triple H and The Undertaker, they had some phenomenal chemistry over the years, and even better, this Mania 27 match had a great depth to it, a great purpose, a great story. Triple H was angry that the Phenom had retired his best pal, and he was out to avenge the end of Shawn Michaels' career by bringing an end to The Undertaker's streak. This wider story was enough to power one more Mania match a year later too, but more on that one later in this video. For now, WrestleMania 27 was about The Undertaker going 19-0, with him locking his Hellgate submission on the game to get the win after 29 minutes. A pretty brilliant back and forth action. This was as vicious as it was epic, and it still left plenty on the bones for WWE to again circle back to Trips and Taker 1 year later. Number 67, The Rock beats John Cena, WrestleMania 28. Once in a lifetime was the branding here, with two of the biggest stars of their respective generations locking horns on the grandest stage of them all. With the marketing and hype drummed up in the lead to Mania 28, this felt monumental as John Cena squared off against The Rock for the first time ever, and supposedly the only time ever. Making this feel even more big time was that WWE took their time with this one, putting the match in motion 1 year earlier and setting it up the night after WrestleMania 27. The match itself was okay, with it not helped by the fact that The Rock tore his hamstring mid-match, but the simple fact of the matter was this was pure Hollywood box office. Even if you don't like the match or either man in it, there's no denying how much mainstream interest this one picked up at the time, and sometimes that's far more important than putting on a verified 5-star banger. Number 66, twice in a lifetime revenge for John Cena, WrestleMania 29. Once in a lifetime, right? Yeah, not quite. With Rocky having got the win at Mania 28, it was time to rematch Rock and Cena 12 months later. This time it would be a little different, for the WWE Championship was now on the line, with The Rock having beaten CM Punk for that title at the Royal Rumble, retained it against Punk at Elimination Chamber, and then walked into WrestleMania 29 as the WWE Champ. Sadly, those dreaming of a CM Punk versus John Cena match were left disappointed, and likewise, WWE opted against making the WWE title match a triple threat. Nope, Vince McMahon, he was set on Rock vs Cena II. Unfortunately for the Great One though, he went and topped that hamstring injury from the year prior, tearing ab and adductor muscles and even suffering a hernia before the match came to an end and Cena got his win back. Number 65, The Undertaker shows a different side. WrestleMania 12. WrestleMania 12 was a bit of a strange time for Kevin Nash and The Undertaker. Both men knew that the focal point of the event was Bret Hart defending the WWF title against Shawn Michaels in a grueling Iron Man match no less. Plus the standard formula for two big men going at it that usually meant for a plodding, rough around the edges match. Added to that, Nash, as Diesel, had 1 foot out of the door, being only 6 weeks or so away from leaving for WCW. Regardless of that, Nash and Taker decided to try something a little different, producing a far zippier, sharper match than the usual Undertaker stuff of that time. This was a far cry from your usual big man versus big man fare, such as Diesel versus Sid from a year earlier. Big Sexy is often talked about needing movement, as in a smaller guy to bump around for him for his better matches, and astonishingly, that movement came from The Undertaker at WrestleMania 12, with the Phenom more like a cruiserweight at times here. Fair to say, 1996 would become a major turning point for The Undertaker as an in-ring performer, as he was finally allowed to show more than just the tired, plodding shtick he'd done since joining the company in 1990, and those talents would get to fully shine once Mick Foley joined the WWF a few months later. Number 64, Stone Cold bows out with a loss. WrestleMania 19. The Rock and Stone Cold created WrestleMania magic whenever they came together at the granddaddy of them all, and while WrestleMania 19 was probably the worst of their 3 Mania matches, that doesn't mean it was bad. If anything, this third match meant more on a deeper level to the two men involved, with this being Steve Austin's soft retirement match. Granted, WWE didn't make it known that Stone Cold was calling time in his career heading into that pay-per-view, but Rocky thanking Austin post-match for all to see, that sure was an indicator of where Steve Austin's head was at. The match becomes even more remarkable when learning that Austin was rushed to hospital the night before WrestleMania, suffering severe chest pains that had the Texas Rattlesnake genuinely fearing for his life. Thankfully, Austin managed to make it to WrestleMania for one more round with one of his greatest ever opponents. Number 63, Babyface Bayley comes full circle. WrestleMania 40. While WrestleMania 40 closed out with Cody Rhodes finishing his story, one other talent getting somewhat of a full circle moment themselves was Bayley on that night. From girl next door babyface to edgy heel, Bayley finished her own tale by beating Io Sky to win the WWE Women's title, and fans in attendance absolutely ate it up. The rivalry between Bayley and her old Damage Control pal had been one of the hottest stories leading up to Mania, and hope was high that Bayley would use a WrestleMania win to once again cement herself as a top babyface. And that, well, it kind of happened, as most things post-Mania were a little so-so for Bayley though, unfortunately. But WrestleMania 40, that was a killer night for Bayley and her fans, with those fans cheering on every comeback spot and delivering a deafening reaction when the role model finally put Io Sky away after 15 minutes. Considering Bayley had been left visibly confused and puzzled by fans booing her sympathetic babyface act years earlier, it was all kinds of wholesome to see such a hard-working talent come full circle and put smiles on millions of fans' faces. Number 62, Seth Rollins takes the ultimate RKO. WrestleMania 31. The 29th of March 2015 was a thoroughly fun evening for Seth Rollins. Of course, Rollins stole all of the WrestleMania headlines with the heist of the century, but Seth had already created some buzz earlier in the night with one single bump. Yeah, you know the one. Though Randy Orton was the winner against Rollins at Mania 31, all anyone could talk about after that match was Seth's sensational bump, going for his stomp on the Viper only to eat an all-timer of an RKO. It wasn't long before footage of that bump became the thing to check out on social media, and many fans were still replaying that RKO by the time Sting and Triple H made their way to the ring for their match later on. Anyway, more on that heist of the century in a little while. Number 61, Brothers of Destruction collide. WrestleMania 14. Has anybody had as much of an upturn in their careers across a single year as much as Glenn Jacobs did between 97 and 98? In 1997, Jacobs wasn't even on the WrestleMania 13 card. Instead, he was stuck playing a cosplay version of Kevin Nash. Skip ahead to WrestleMania 14, and Glenn Jacobs was one of the hottest acts in the company as Kane, the believed dead brother of The Undertaker. Kane was just so so cool. A total monster, a total beast, a ball of destructive, violent energy, and someone who gave us the extremely rare sight of seeing The Undertaker positioned as a genuine underdog. That said, many smart fans, they presumed that Kane wouldn't last. They'd stick around until WrestleMania 14, lose to The Undertaker, and then eventually be released, following the path of many a monster threat from over the years. But nah, Kane not only stuck around for another couple of decades, but he'd also rematch with The Undertaker at WrestleMania 20 as part of Taker's rebirth as a phenom once again. And so much of that success for Kane, it can be traced back to how he arrived in a big way in that WrestleMania 14 match, going toe-to-toe with one of the greatest to ever do it, and even in defeat, he still felt like a bona fide top-tier player. And with that, I'm tagging it out to the glorious Cy White to come to the rescue.
Thanks, Pollard. Happy to be here and very happy to talk about number 60, the EST and legit boss improve on history, WrestleMania 37. Sasha Banks vs Bianca Belair wasn't the first female headliner in Mania history. They missed that trick by 2 years. Being first place will count for something when it comes to analyse what happened at 35, but for now, quite simply a better match. Yes, Sasha vs Bianca was a sweeter watch bell to bell than its predecessor. Perhaps that had something to do with it being a straight up singles bout, or maybe Banks and Belair were just determined to improve on history. After all, there was a ton of weight resting on the shoulders of both in 2021, and the EST and legit boss knew they'd have to come up with something amazing or face derision from the entire wrestling world. The good news is that they delivered, so much so that not even Michael Cole screwing up the call for their finish could destroy the moment, although it didn't help. Come on, Michael, get it together. Belair won her first SmackDown Women's title, now the Women's World Championship here, and she's been a made woman ever since. Nobody could have guessed back in 2021 that Banks would be over in All Elite as Mercedes Moné and Belair would be stuck in the tag ranks after just a few years, but in a vacuum they had one hell of a match and one of WrestleMania's best women's bouts ever. Number 59, Brock Lesnar recovers from disaster, WrestleMania 19. Kurt Angle had nerves of steel to lay flat out watching Muscle Mountain Brock Lesnar come spinning towards him at WrestleMania 19. Then, disaster struck. Brock's shooting star press attempt went wrong and the next big thing landed smack bang on his head and neck. On commentary, Michael Cole tried to cover for the botch by claiming Angle rolled out of the way. That simply wasn't true, but the spot still looked spectacular nonetheless. The Seattle crowd reacted with the kind of oh my god that one would expect upon seeing a man the size of Brock Lesnar pulling out such an aerial move. And sure, whilst he had performed the shooting star press successfully before, he was warned against trying it in the main event of Mania without rehearsing it. But I guess Brock Lesnar thought, nah, stuff that, it'll be fine. It was not fine. So you might be wondering why this mistake is on a list called Greatest WrestleMania Moments. Well, not only did it still look impressive, there were a few other things at play. Brock suffered a concussion after nearly crushing himself under his own weight, and Kurt went into this match rehabbing a broken freaking neck. This is exactly what people mean when they say that pro wrestlers have to be crazy to do what they do. Somehow Lesnar managed to recover in time to snatch an F5 and put Angle away for the 3 counts, and whilst the botch became legendary, everybody was most impressed by the way that Brock shook disaster off and managed to finish the match anyway. Number 58, Randy and Ric Flair get bloody, WrestleMania 8. Vince McMahon was left fuming when Randy Savage and Ric Flair totally ignored the company's strict anti-blood policy during their title match at Mania 8. Knowing their mid-card tussle needed some more juice, in more than one sense of the word, the Nature Boy reached into his bag of tricks to blade his forehead and work a gusher right before dropping the strap to Savage. That behaviour led to a hefty fine from the boss. Hilariously, Bret Hart and Roddy Piper conspired to do exactly the same thing during their IC title showdown earlier in the night, but for some reason they got away with it. I guess Slick Rick, maybe not as slick as he thought he was. McMahon was angry, and yet there's no denying that colour added a fair bit to Savage versus Flair. They'd been locked in an intense feud that saw Rick tease Randy about Ms. Elizabeth, so the blood was borderline essential to sell that hatred. Plus, if both were being honest, they presumably felt a little bit jilted that they'd been ousted from their headline spot by a non-title match between Hulk Hogan and Sid Justice. Additionally worthy of note, this would actually wind up being Flair's last WrestleMania until 2002, and it's also notable for introducing Shane McMahon as an on-screen character when he showed up as one of the officials trying to restrain Miss Elizabeth and stop her from getting involved in the match. Number 57, Edge and Christian win the Triangle Ladder War, WrestleMania 2000. Edge, Christian and the Hardys didn't know that they were changing the face of the industry forever when they bounced around in a ladder match bump fest at No Mercy 1999. Come the following flagship episode of Raw, all four received a standing ovation from the live crowd and knew that they were onto something with this car crash-esque, unavoidably painful style. The WWF saw dollar signs and decided to shove the Dudleys into the mix too. And so at WrestleMania 2000, all three hungry young teams faced off in a three-way ladder war for the tag belts. Like before, big bumps with the general rule of thumb. Nobody was safe from flying off a ladder, taking a few stiff weapon shots, or crashing through some tables. And naturally, of course, this is considered the genesis for what would become known as TLC. It's a shame that their bout at WrestleMania 2000 is often overlooked when people reminisce about the chemistry these teams had together. While SummerSlam 2000's original TLC match and Mania X7 sequel usually get most of the praise, Mania 2000 shouldn't be completely dismissed if you're charting some of the best matches and moments from WWE's most famous event series. And watching it back 25 years later, I have to guess that some of them are still feeling some of those bumps. Eesh. Number 56, the dead man becomes WWF champ again, WrestleMania 13. Taker and Mania went together like biscuits and gravy for decades. No, not that kind. So it's no surprise that the dead man is appearing all over this list. In 1997, the WWF hitched their wagon to the icon and crowned him champ again. It was a popular decision, not least because Taker beat out perennial menace Psycho Sid to win big and end the night in party mode with his creatures of the night. The actual meat of the match isn't what's most important. The Undertaker winning his second WWF title was the best endpoint for the headliner. If Austin versus Brett couldn't go on last, then this was the next best thing for fans. And the tagline for Mania 13 was simply heat. Things were definitely hot as Taker toasted his latest success and no doubt looked forward to money-spinning matches versus Michaels, Hart, Austin, and others. A new era was dawning for the promotion following 1997's Supercard. The more some things change, other things stay the same. Taker was a constant that the McMahon family knew they could depend upon to carry their torch with distinction. Number 55, the Firefly Funhouse silliness, WrestleMania 36. COVID left WWE with no other option but to shut Mania away behind closed doors and retreat to the quaint surroundings of the in-house performance center. It was a scary and uncertain time for many, no doubt. The age-old phrase, "the show must go on," though, came to the fore and ensured that WWE's biggest annual event would still go ahead. Adapting to the unique circumstances, creative dreamt up all manner of off-the-wall cinematics that would help turn the strangest WrestleMania yet into a winner in its own right. Bray Wyatt welcomed John Cena into his Firefly Funhouse for a balmy set of scenes that included Cena going back to his humble rookie days, both joining the NWO, and the pair working spoofs of Saturday night's main event. WWE knew they were free to experiment like never before now that they didn't have fans inside of an arena to keep entertained. It was clear Cena and Bray had had a blast letting their creative juices flow freely, and then Titus Neal summed it up best by scratching his head and wondering what the heck he'd just witnessed. Yeah, Titus, same. Fans forced to give up Mania tickets and watch from home generally agreed that Cena and Wyatt made the best of a bad situation. And frankly, this will always be remembered as one of the many reasons why Bray was considered amongst wrestling's greatest creative minds. Number 54, Rey Mysterio defies the odds, WrestleMania 22. Emotion meets WrestleMania. Oh, I see, you're very long-standing friends. And rarely have emotions been higher than in 2006 when Rey Mysterio won the 30-man Royal Rumble and tearfully marched onto WrestleMania with destiny as the spirit of fallen friend Eddie Guerrero spurred him on. WWE don't always come through on the feel-good sentiments, but they did it at WrestleMania 22. The booking for Rey's world title win didn't miss, and then he embraced Chavo and Vicky as everyone honoured the Guerrero family. Chef's kiss. On camera, WWE explained that Mysterio's love for Eddie was like rocket fuel. He wouldn't rest until he could pay tribute to Latino heat by defying the odds and winning main events during a period of the year normally dedicated to anything but pushing masked high flyers. Of course, this was never going to be part of the plan when Rey signed, but hard work, sustainably healthy merchandise sales, and the personal touch of his kinship with Guerrero sold management on Rey's Rumble win and Mania memory. Even if you took issue with Rey pinning fellow challenger Randy Orton instead of the defending champion Kurt Angle, you kinda got over it in a hurry, because there was too much heartfelt emotion on display to really care about the details. Viva La Raza. Number 53, Bret Hart regains his Intercontinental title, WrestleMania 8. Bret Hart and the Intercontinental title go together like biscuits and gravy. Yeah, okay, I already did that one. After dropping the prize to the Mountie of all people in 1992, a babyface versus babyface match was signed for WrestleMania 8, and it's worth saying that Bret Hart and Roddy Piper Piper did well to get feisty without going overboard or necessitating a heel turn for either man. It was all spirited stuff, but then the bell sounded and things got hyper-aggressive really fast. And as mentioned previously, Bret and Roddy used blood to heighten their match, and they damn sure got away with it too. The finishing stretch to this IC classic was a thing of beauty. Piper gripped Bret in his sleeper hold, but the Hitman showed unparalleled ring awareness to push off the turnbuckles and pin his real-life friend for the title win. The IC title was back where most people thought that it belonged. It could be argued that Roddy Piper was perhaps past his prime by 92, but this showdown is probably his best WrestleMania appearance. And again, you could put a potted plant into the ring with Bret Hart and it would still be entertaining, so there is that. Number 52, CM Punk goes after Taker's streak, WrestleMania 29. There was a chip on CM Punk's shoulder the size of the mammoth Statue of Liberty set piece that WWE erected at WrestleMania 29. I mean, after all, he'd had the belt for 434 days before dropping it to a returning Rock, just so that he could be pushed out of Vince McMahon going back on the once-in-a-lifetime branding and have Rocky versus Cena II. To make it up to Punk, McMahon placed him in the next best imaginable position. He'd be gunning for the Undertaker's lofty winning streak and trying to become the one in 20-1. Realistically, most buying the pay-per-view knew that that wasn't going to happen, but doubts were cast during the build when Punk stomped all over tributes to Paul Bearer and stole Taker's urn like many before him. However, Punk melted it down into an ornamental can of Pepsi and placed it on his fireplace. Okay, no, that didn't happen. Several close near falls taunted and teased those who never wanted to see the legend lose at WrestleMania, but Punk came eerily close to beating Brock Lesnar to the punch 12 months earlier, and he had to be fairly satisfied with his night's work, even though an elusive main event slot would have been even better. Number 51, Nostalgic Run-Ins Delight, WrestleMania 40. Nostalgia is a hell of a thing, and many lapsed wrestling fans will see the advertising for the latest edition of the show and think warmly back on memories past. So imagine their faces when they came round to checking out WrestleMania 40. The Rock worked both nights of the event, a tag match alongside Roman Reigns versus Cody Rhodes and Seth Rollins on night 1, and then ran into the main event of night 2 alongside the Usos, Rollins, John Cena and The Undertaker. Rock, Cena and Taker were all treated like nostalgic blasts from the past coming back to haunt one another, and it was kind of glorious. Sure, you might think that all of this was a little bit overbooked, and that's fair enough, but that's kind of missing the point. Was it bloated? Yes. Over the top? Undeniably so, but was it also wonderful and exciting? Yeah! WWE know they can't go all in on nostalgia fests like this at every show, but this was the 40th WrestleMania and the time for Rhodes to finish the story. Things had to be over the top, if only to keep the drama at a fever pitch and to differentiate this sequel from Mania 39's bitterly disappointing results. Now, for some reason, I have a craving for biscuits and gravy, so I'm going to tag out for a moment. Pollard, you're back in.
A fantastic job, Si, and now we continue on with number 50, a women's triple threat furthers the revolution, WrestleMania 32. 2016 was a major turning point for WWE and its women's division. After a 30-second Raw match saw #Give Divas a Chance trend in February 2015, later that year saw WWE promote the women's revolution. Although not before the ladies only got 6 minutes of bell time on the WrestleMania 31 card, of course. But for WrestleMania 32, the Divas title was thankfully dumped, with Lita introducing the new, far more distinguished Women's Championship, and Charlotte Flair, Sasha Banks and Becky Lynch got the chance to properly tear it up for 60 minutes, putting on the greatest women's WrestleMania match of all time, by that point, of course. Better yet, each worker brought something unique to the table for that match, Flair having the lineage and name, Banks being an attraction with mainstream appeal, and Becky the spunky grafter who hadn't quite found her calling yet, but who was slowly starting to find her feet on the main roster. It absolutely ruled to see NXT's developmental style playing out in such a major way on such a grand stage. And while critics might not want to hear it, Charlotte Flair was 100% the right choice to win here, with her slightly ahead of Banks and Becky in terms of star power at that point in time. Number 49, Sami Zayn gets a singles mania moment, WrestleMania 40. Sami Zayn's journey from easy to hate conspiracy theorist heel to sympathetic Spitfire babyface, that should be studied. Similarly, every pro wrestler under the sun should get their textbooks out and learn from the way Gunther endured a major defeat, then bounced back better than ever. Mania 40's opening night was great, but it rarely got any better than Sami Zayn tearing down the ring general en route to a highly craved Intercontinental title win. The atmosphere was immense as the match really got going, fans losing their minds at the thought of Sami somehow beating the unbeatable champion, and also the fear that WWE, they might pull the rug out on those fans and have Sami Zayn come up short short. Of course, it was Sami standing tall when all was said and done, bringing Gunther's reign to an end in an impressive 666 days. This was timeless WrestleMania drama, and it's scary to remember Vince McMahon, he didn't see anything in Gunther and at one point wanted to send him back to NXT, you crazy old fool. Who knew that indie faves El Generico and Walter would one day get to enjoy such a massive Mania moment? Number 48, Ronda Rousey's blistering debut, WrestleMania 34. In 2018, you could have been forgiven for thinking that Ronda Rousey was the female coming of Kurt Angle. The former UFC badass made this pro wrestling lark look well easy, as she teamed with the Olympian versus Triple H and Stephanie McMahon in probably the best mixed tag team match ever. Those worried about what Ronda pulling punches and working a submission-heavy style would look like, they got to breathe a sigh of relief as Rowdy Ronda looked every bit a main event megastar. Seriously, few, if any, had ever been this extraordinary during their very first pro wrestling match. Not just that, but we're talking about the stage of WrestleMania and all the pressure that comes with that. A pressure that far more experienced workers than Ronda Rousey have folded under. Of course, praise has to go to Kurt Angle, Triple H and Stephanie McMahon for helping to guide Ronda through every spot, and it's sadly fair to say that Ronda Rousey would never look this great again. Sure, Ronda had her moments, but this debut, it was simply sensational stuff, with Rousey looking like an electric mix of Kurt Angle and Brock Lesnar. It was absolutely scary. Number 47, Edge wins the first Money in the Bank, WrestleMania 21. Money in the Bank might be an annual attraction nowadays, complete with its own PLE of course, but the concept was a little out there when it was introduced for WrestleMania 21 back in 2005. Chris Jericho is the one credited with coming up with the Money in the Bank idea, then pitching it with WWE writer Brian Gewirtz. That pitch, it was pretty simple. The winner of a ladder match would be able to cash in for a title shot at any point during the next 12 months. Pretty simple, but pretty darn genius. At Mania 21, Edge was handpicked to become the very first Mr. Money in the Bank, seeing off Jericho, Kane, Christian, Shelton Benjamin, and Chris Benoit. The 15 minutes of stunt show bumps, that was nothing new in terms of execution, but it did serve as a fascinating indicator of who WWE was weighing up as a future top star. In this case, that would be Edge. Sure, Edge is these days an 11-time world champion and a bona fide Hall of Famer, but back then, he was far from nailed on as a main event talent. There had been injury layoffs, there had been floundering years in the mid-card, and there was a sense of uncertainty over how viable Edge would be as a marquee star. Money in the Bank though, that proved to be a brilliant way to take Edge to that next level. The right match, the right concept, at the right time for the ultimate opportunist. Number 46, Daniel Bryan's unlikely in-ring return, WrestleMania 34. For the longest time, the idea of seeing Daniel Bryan back cracking skulls, it seemed like an impossible dream. That being in the aftermath of Bryan's forced retirement in 2016, of course. But by 2018, a medical miracle seemingly happened, with Bryan cleared by doctors and returning to the ring in time for WrestleMania 34. Sure, it was a tag match with Shane McMahon against Kevin Owens as Sami Zayn, not some showcase singles bout, but still, everybody was just absolutely buzzing to have Daniel Bryan once again lacing up his boots, as reflected by how loud the New Orleans crowd got when Bryan tapped out Sami Zayn for the win. Many wondered whether Daniel Bryan would still be able to go. Many wondered whether there'd be any ring rust, or whether his health would hold up. And on that front, Daniel Bryan wasted zero time in showing that, yeah, not only could he still go, but that he was still one of the very best wrestlers on the planet, if not the best wrestler on the planet. Number 45, Shawn Michaels regains his mojo, WrestleMania 19. Shawn Michaels was never particularly shy with making it known just how great a pro wrestler he was. The Heartbreak Kid is one of the very best to ever lace up a pair of boots, and he was never afraid to let everybody know it, especially during the 90s. Still, despite returning with a bang at SummerSlam 2002, then winning the World Heavyweight title in the very first Elimination Chamber, the showstopper had quite the crisis of confidence heading into WrestleMania 19. Privately, Shawn was still finding his feet when WWE announced he'd be facing Chris Jericho at Mania 19, and Michaels feared he'd stink the joint out on the grandest stage of them all. Had Mr. WrestleMania lost his WrestleMania touch? Nah, absolutely not. And Chris Jericho fully knew that that would be the case. As Jericho recalled in one of his books, Michaels was full of self-doubt. Sure, that unsanctioned SummerSlam match with Triple H was one thing, but delivering a performance to match those lofty WrestleMania expectations, that was something else entirely. Of course, Jericho and Michaels completely stole the show on that night, and a re-energized Shawn shouted out a "follow that" when the two got backstage. It can't be understated how big a deal WrestleMania 19 was for HBK, and Jericho has regularly talked about his own gratitude at being the one chosen to help get one of his idols back on track. The Jericho and Michaels rivalry of 2008, that lives long in the memory as one of the greatest rivalries of the modern era. But that 2003 WrestleMania match, that was way more important to Shawn Michaels. titles. Number 44, Demolition three-peat, WrestleMania 6. In many ways, WrestleMania 6 was somewhat of a send-off for Demolition. Axe and Smash will be joined by Crush that June, but anyone curious about how popular the team was back then, go and check out the pop Demolition got for beating Andre the Giant and Haku to become 3-time WWF Tag Team Champs. Or as Gorilla Monsoon put it, Demolition, they had managed to three-peat. Seriously, without any exaggeration whatsoever, this was as big a pop as anything Hulk Hogan or Ultimate Warrior got later that night at WrestleMania 6. Yep, those Demolition boys, they were over, brother. Andre's failing health meant that Haku did the bulk of the heavy lifting for the Colossal Connection here, and that was fine. For the bigger story was Demolition getting back the belts and opening WrestleMania 6 in a way that had the Toronto crowd eating out of their palms. Number 43, Andre the Giant wants to ride alone, WrestleMania 6. Of course, it would be remiss to talk about that WrestleMania 6 opener and not bring up what happened next, as in Bobby the Brain Heenan blaming Andre for costing his team the tag team titles. Heenan made the bold decision to poke Andre in the chest, all as he insulted the big fella, and then he even slapped Andre in the face. Yeah, the 8th wonder of the world, he was not having any of that, and Andre slapped Heenan back, or paintbrushed him, again as Gorilla Monsoon would put it. As the crowd, they furiously cheered on for Andre. This was the first time in over 3 years, since before WrestleMania 3 in fact, that Andre the Giant had been a babyface. Even more memorable, the Giant then stopped Heenan and Haku from joining him on those motorized WrestleMania kart things, as Jesse Ventura pointed out that Andre, he wanted to ride alone. And again, in a brilliant line from Monsoon, who was gonna stop him? Number 42, Steve Austin shakes hands with the devil, WrestleMania 17. It's all a bit crazy to think back to everything that was going on in the WWF in April 2001. Vince McMahon had just purchased the last remaining remnants of WCW. ECW has closed its doors. The XFL was starting up. That'd go well, wouldn't it? And the WWF was preparing to put on WrestleMania 17. To many, this was the apex of the Attitude Era. It would never get better than this. It's also worth adding that, yeah, Stone Cold Steve Austin was about to turn heel by aligning himself with Vince McMahon, no less. Was this a mistake? Many, including Austin himself, would say yes, with Austin having said how he wishes he'd called an audible and hit Vince with a Stone Cold Stunner. Still, that moment absolutely qualifies as one of Mania's greatest, with it unfathomable that these two old rivals would ever join forces, let alone to stop The Rock here from retaining the WWF title. Sure, the lead to Mania saw Austin say how he needed to be champion more than anything in the world, but shaking hands with the WWF's very own devil incarnate? Nah, nobody saw that one coming, mate. Number 41, Bret Hart ends WrestleMania 10 on top of the world, WrestleMania 10. As a huge Bret Hart fan, I like to pretend the end of WrestleMania 9 never ever happened. No, not Yokozuna beating Bret necessarily, that's fine. Just the Hulk Hogan BS that followed all of that. Either way, by WrestleMania 10, Vince McMahon was weighing up who to fully get behind as the guy, now that Hogan was finally out of the picture. With Bret and Lex Luger being joint winners of the 1994 Royal Rumble, McMahon used the fan reaction to that Rumble win to see who crowds were more invested in. Vince obviously saw the Jack Tan physique of the All-American Lex Luger and saw his next Hulk Hogan in waiting. But those fans, nah man, we all wanted Bret Hart. So, the stage was set for WrestleMania 10 as a Rumble co-winner, Lex would face WWF champion Yokozuna in the middle of the card, with the winner then facing Bret Hart in the main event. And in order to not make it any easier for the Hitman, he faced his brother Owen in the Mania 10 opener. It is an absolute stunner. 5 stars by any metric. 12 stars if it was in Tokyo, I'm sure. With Yoko having got a DQ win over Luger, the stage was set for Bret Hart versus Yokozuna in the WrestleMania 10 main event, a rematch of the previous year's headline attraction, with Roddy Piper as the special guest referee, which is kind of ironic when you think of Hulk Hogan and his shenanigans at WrestleMania 9, those two being longtime rivals. Bret Hart got his crowning moment, winning his second world title and proving to Vince McMahon that he could be his guy, complete with a string of babyfaces, including Luger, lifting the Hitman up on their shoulders as Madison Square Garden went wild. And with that, I'm tagging out as Sai comes in to once again kick all the ass.
Thanks, Pollard. Let's keep this train rolling with number 40, the Boneyard Let's Take a Leave on a cinematic high, WrestleMania 36. Imagine stepping into a time machine going back about 10 to 15 years and telling people, psst, the Undertaker's career will end in a cinematic match at WrestleMania which will be behind closed doors against AJ Styles. There's several reasons there why their heads might explode, but the first question they might ask would be, what the hell is a cinematic match? And they'd be right to do so. It was never planned, but that's partly why the Boneyard match from Mania 36 was so refreshing. Taker and Styles had to get seriously creative. Not only that, but the pair had to lay down a mark of what could be expected from WWE's soon-to-be obsession with cinematic bouts during the closed doors of 2020 2020 and 2021. Truly, everyone was flying by the seat of their pants with this one. If nothing else, it was 1,000,000 times better than some of Undertaker's latest in-ring disasters. See the Goldberg feud and whatever the hell that tag match at Saudi Arabia with the Brothers in Destruction and DX was supposed to be. Because on the other hand, the Boneyard was epic. AJ's pals Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson got involved, so did a boatload of druids, and WWE went Hollywood fight scene to try and give Taker a worthwhile send-off. Okay, maybe not Hollywood, more like B-movie, which in a funny kind of way was an appropriate send-off for wrestling's most consistent supernatural character. Pure and simple, this one had no right to be as entertaining and well-received as it was. Number 39, welcome to WrestleMania III. WrestleMania III. It's widely accepted that WWE exaggerated Mania 3's attendance figures, but let's get one thing straight. Selling the number of tickets they did for a stadium show was still impressive. Fans had bought into the WWF brand and they wanted to be there for the box office showdown between Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant. After Vince introduced the show, he queued up Aretha Franklin to sing America the Beautiful and exited the ring. And surely he must have been bursting with pride after walking out to see so many people looking back at him. You can argue that this moment alone proved that Vince was right to expand the business and risk it all with the original WrestleMania. Going bigger than Mania 3, however, would be a challenge, but that's a hurdle for another day. McMahon's intro was unquestionably iconic and WWE used it in video packages for decades to come, and the only reason they stopped was Vince resigning in disgrace. WrestleMania 3's opening was stunning stuff, and the most important point of all was that sports entertainment was working. Number 38, Cody Rhodes returns home, WrestleMania 38. Wrestling has more than one royal family. Business also has more than one major company, which is why it was shocking to see Cody Rhodes trade the organization he helped create and build for the one that sickened him to his stomach in 2016. The phrase unfinished business comes to mind. He couldn't retire with a what-if question hanging over his head as big as WWE. Rumors began during the earlier months of 2022, and then they gathered pace as WrestleMania 38 loomed. Seth Rollins entered and waited to find out who his mystery opponent would be, and that's when everyone's brains melted and Cody's AEW theme started playing over the speakers. No jump between both promotions felt bigger than this. Rollins sold the comeback like he was seeing a ghost, and millions of fingers frantically punched characters into phones as Twitter creaked under the weight of the conversation. Everyone wanted to have their 2 cents about AEW Cody returning to WWE and re-debuting at WrestleMania. It was huge. Lesser workers would have been satisfied with the return and started treading water after that, but not Rhodes. It says everything for the man that he's gone on to live out several even more impressive moments since this. Anyone who's addicted to goosebumps though should revisit Mania 38 and listen to the thrilling response to his music. People knew who it was instantly, and oh my god, it's a great piece of music, so how could you not pop? Number 37, Macho Man becomes WWF Champion, WrestleMania 4. Word of warning, inflicting the entirety of WrestleMania 4's tournament on some unsuspecting victim is a criminal offense in some territories. Despite having Jake Roberts versus Rick Rude and Ricky Steamboat versus Greg Valentine, well, let's just say those workers were too good to have matches that crap. But on a brighter note, Randy Savage. Hogan and Andre went to a double DQ during their Mania 3 rematch in the quarterfinals, and that handed hated heel Ted DiBiase a bye through to the final. Meanwhile, Macho Man had to contend with Butch Reed, Valentine, and One Man Gang before reaching the main event. Announcers claimed Randy was exhausted, but it's funny because he actually worked less ring time than Rude or Roberts had. Still, story was story, and this was a good one. Savage's babyface ascent was almost complete. Come headliner time, Hogan helped crown his would-be Mega Powers buddy as the new champ, and it felt like the dawn of a new era for the Fed. Hulkamania was out, for now, and Macho Madness was very much in. Ooh yeah. Number 36, Drew McIntyre shares a moment with fans, WrestleMania 36. Drew McIntyre morphed into a 10-year-old version of himself on Christmas morning upon winning the 2020 Royal Rumble. Spinning around in ecstasy, the Scot pushed his way into the hearts of wrestling fans who understood his passion. Then COVID hit and McIntyre watched a surefire WrestleMania 36 banger in front of a sold-out stadium melt away in front of him. In typically staunch fashion though, the newly minted babyface refused to feel sorry for himself. His interviews heading into Mania 36 were tinged with sadness but realism. People around the world had it much harder than him, and he was still going to win the big one on WWE's Grandest stage. That title change was a poorly kept secret during the build, but nobody cared. They were too busy appreciating the chance to switch off from uncertainty and fear and switch on to some sugary sweet WWE goodness. In an unscripted scripted moment, the new WWE champ reached a hand out to the camera lens and thanked people for following his journey. It'd been a tough one. Drew was cut loose in 2014 and had to pull himself up by his bootstraps via the indie scene. A 2017 comeback followed, then 2020's mega push began. It's just a shame that it had to happen in front of exactly 0 fans there live in the stands. Number 35, real life friends win tag gold, WrestleMania 39. Sometimes there's nothing better than a fantastic tag match. And sure, the WWE sometimes can't figure out whether it's coming or going, with whether it even bothers with tag teams sometimes. But the full spotlight was beamed onto the Usos and Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn at Mania 39. People were calling the match one of the best tags ever before it had even happened. And that was all because the company announced that it would main event the first of 2 nights in California. Zayn was fresh off exiting the Bloodline and losing to Roman Reigns at Elimination Chamber, so he arguably needed something like this to sink his teeth into. Getting the band back together with on and off friend Owens was the tonic he required as a character, and the Usos were quite a brilliant heel counterpoint for the beloved babyface duo. Anyone could see that a positive reaction could be garnered from not just putting something fresh like a tag match in the main event, but a tag match with very real teams in it. Actual brothers and actual real friends. And then the cherry on top is ending the night with a babyface win for the history books. One could sense how much this meant to Owens and Zayn personally. They travelled up and down roads together, earning a pittance but literally spilling blood for their love of wrestling. Now here they were, hugging after representing tag action with aplomb and winning the main event of WrestleMania. Absolute scenes. Number 34, Battle of the Billionaires, WrestleMania 23. The world was a very different place in 2007. Take me back. Jokes aside, Steve Austin was hitting stunners on Donald Trump, Vince McMahon was crying on camera after getting his head shaved, and Lashley vs Umaga was the match WWE used to frame their Battle of the Billionaires. All of that is really weird to look back on now. But only a fool could deny the pure entertainment value of this money-based skirmish. Credit where credit is due, WWE knew that Trump would bring some mainstream media attention, and McMahon was only too happy to make a fool of himself in front of as many people as possible if it meant maximising his profit margins. Business success was all that mattered for an undercard attraction like this. The match itself, nothing really to write home about, but that's fine because all eyes were on Trump, McMahon and Austin. Vince's comeuppance was satisfying, and Stone Cold laying out Trump with a stunner scratched that itch as well. In the end, everyone was happy, and sure, the Battle of the Billionaires is probably not going to be anyone's number 1 favourite WrestleMania moment, but it deserves to be in the list because it's the perfect demonstration of what WrestleMania is: celebrity, soap opera, and personal stakes. Number 33, Austin and The Rock's first headliner, WrestleMania 15. 1999 was a lucrative year for the WWF, but it was a topsy-turvy one creatively. It's fair to say that that year's Royal Rumble was one of the worst up to that point, and it hinged completely on the hatred between Austin and McMahon. Without that, there's really nothing else going on. Thankfully though, WrestleMania 15 was a lot better. Austin met The Rock on the biggest show of the year for the very first time, and they had a wild brawl that logically tied in more of the Austin versus McMahon chaos, with a tiny sprinkling of Mick Foley backstory and Shawn Michaels-led drama before the bell sounded. While Stone Cold was already cozy as the main man in the company, by the spring of 99, The Rock was still rising, and it's amazing that he looked like he'd been headlining these shows all along by this point. People are often split on which match they prefer. 15, X7 and 19 all had unique things on offer, but the original was boosted by the benefit of freshness. Fans had watched the pair war over the IC title, and now they were further up the card fighting over the richest prize. It felt natural, and Austin was the right winner. It also followed that bit where The Undertaker hung Big Boss Man from a cell, so we needed some goodness in our lives after whatever that was. Number 32, Bret and Owen Hart's brotherly battle, WrestleMania 10. Brothers fighting brothers, mothers in tears at the thought of it, and someone kicking another man's leg out of his leg. Oh yes, the build up towards Bret versus Owen at Mania 10 was something else. The best heels believe in what they're saying, and it was wholly plausible that an older sibling like the Hitman always thought he knew better than everyone else. And despite the frost between them, Bret and Owen didn't need to go full-on violent brawling mode just yet. They showed off their technical skills during the WrestleMania opener and went down the pure pro wrestling match road instead. Back home, Stu and Helen had to be proud of their boys for doing the family name justice on such a big platform as the WWE's annual showcase. This was Stampede quality wrestling with better production, to the point where people still point at it as one of the best curtain jerkers in the history of the business. The finish, which saw Owen stun Bret for the win, was smart business. It prepped both siblings for more business over the summer once the elder Hart was WWF champion. Only one other match at Mania 10 came close to Bret vs Owen, and it it needed a gimmick to get there. Number 31, Steve Austin's first match in 19 years, WrestleMania 38. WWE got ballsy when promoting the KO show with special guest Steve Austin as the main event of Mania 38's first night. Sure, fans would assume that they would end up brawling, which was exciting enough, but the promotion never explicitly stated that Stone Cold will be in an official match. The cat wasn't let out of the bag until Austin and Owens were actually face to face inside the ring. Concerns that Austin working another match 19 years after his last would stink the place out were fair. I mean, his body was shot to pieces back then, so what the hell would it be like in 2022? Pretty good, as it turns out. On top of this, there's a reason why Austin picked Kev. He'd long admired the way Owens honoured the old school WWE main event brawling style and mixed in some modern sensibilities. Also, and this was important, Steve needed somebody who wasn't shy about bumping around for him. His opponent would need to create the most of the movement, and KO had no problem doing that. Their match was a miraculous success. It didn't even matter that Austin went over in the end. I mean, that was a thrill for lifelong fan Owens anyway, and the match was good enough that everyone wanted to pop with Stone Cold hitting a home run one last time. Assuming it is the last time. I guess time will only tell. And now from one side to another, take it away, Simon Miller.
It is I, Simon Miller, back because I have number 30, old friends embraced as confetti falls at WrestleMania 20. So I just have to talk to you personally for 1 second, and please do forgive me, but I cannot watch this moment anymore. However, everybody at WhatCulture agreed you can't leave it off. It's just a very difficult situation. But of course, Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit in the wrestling world were deemed too small to headline any sort of show or be a world champion when they were in WCW. And even when they jumped across to the World Wrestling Federation, I don't think anybody predicted this. There's even a story from Jim Ross who said the first time Vince McMahon saw Eddie Guerrero, he said out loud, "Oh my gosh, that man is tiny." Do with that what you will. By 2004, the WWE was a very different place, and as we were looking for some WrestleMania moments, well, we did it at Mania 20. Because not only did Eddie retain his WWE title with one of the best tricks ever against Kurt Angle, but Chris Benoit walked away with the World Heavyweight Championship, and he beat flippin' Triple H and Shawn Michaels. Seeing the two embrace in the ring afterwards as the Madison Square Garden crowd go crazy, though, is one of those things that's etched into your brain. But yes, once again, I do need to double down. Given everything that did happen in 2007, this one isn't for me, but it is one of those things that will be talked about forever. Number 29, Seth Rollins cashes in at WrestleMania 31. So there are so many stories we could tell about this one, including the fact that Seth Rollins didn't even know this was going to happen until the day, and even then he sat backstage going, my gosh, this opportunity could be taken away at any point. That's the kind of back and forth that everybody was experiencing. It was totally genius though, because the main event of WrestleMania was Roman Reigns versus Brock Lesnar, and let's go back to the Raw beforehand. Those two had basically played pull apart with the world title, and it was one of the most childish things anybody had ever seen. Now you do have to give credit to Roman and Brock because they went out there and lumped the crap out of each other, but it's fair to say that in the preamble we could have done better. Therefore, when Rollins did arrive to cash in his Money in the Bank, everybody lost their minds. This was a moment of genius. As he was running down the ramp too, everybody's brains were going crazy, because would this make this a triple threat match? And the answer was yes. The fact Seth then stomped Roman Reigns to get the 1, 2, 3, well, talk about adding some extra ammunition to a feud that may never end. It also really took the idea of the Money in the Bank briefcase and made it even better, and if we were going to rank the cash-ins, this one has to be number 1 or number 2. It was absolutely brilliant. Just go and talk about cash-ins to any wrestling fan today though. If they don't mention this, well, it may be your nan in a mask. Number 28, the first ever women's headliner at WrestleMania 35. So yes, there is one big asterisk here, and that is because now we do know the referee sort of mucked up the finish when Becky Lynch crucifix pinned Ronda Rousey to get the 1, 2, 3 and become the double champ. Word on the street is that was never supposed to be the ending, which begs the question what the finish was meant to be, but let's not even worry about that, because seeing Becky Lynch on that rampway as WrestleMania 35 came to the close, well, it was long overdue that women had finally main evented WrestleMania. You do have to give a lot of credit to Ronda Rousey too, because it was her mainstream appeal that helped this, but Becky, of course, at this time was one of the biggest superstars in the world, and I didn't even mind the fact that Charlotte Flair got put in there. She had put in a lot of hard work too, and if WWE thought this was going to make the match better, but it just meant that somebody else was able to get a warm and fuzzy feeling in their tum-tum. It's the wider effect this may have had, because imagine you were a little girl at home watching WWE, you would have seen this and thought to yourself, man, when I grow up, maybe I can do this, and representation is super duper important. So it goes down in the history books and we can never undo it. Let's hope we have more of this in the future. I mean, there's no reason not to. Have you seen some of the women on the roster today? They've all got the chops. They are pretty flipping good. Number 27, Linda McMahon stands up at WrestleMania 17. Now that sounds weird if you don't know the context. You probably heard that and said, Simon, did you just tell me you're getting excited about somebody standing up? And my answer to you is yes. It kind of underlines how great sports entertainment is though, because while somebody right now has just hit a Canadian destroyer and everyone's going, oh, that's brilliant, that's essentially the same kind of reaction that Linda McMahon did get at WrestleMania 17. Now, it is super difficult to talk about because we do have to get into the story, and yes, all of this is true. The match on the night was Vince McMahon versus Shane McMahon, and along the way, the McMahon family had fallen out, including Vince drugging his wife, so he could have an affair with Trish Stratus. I am very sorry. Now, it was super duper uncomfortable, and really back then and today, it never should have flied, but it did lead to this. And my gosh, what a pop. Because for a good few months leading up to Mania 17, Linda McMahon was quite literally in a wheelchair, and that of course meant she was being wheeled around the place. It also meant that Vince was doing some terrible things in front of her in her comatose state, so when she was put in the ring in the corner at Mania 17, and like I've already told you, she did get to her feet, well, every single fan knew what was about to happen, and they were mighty excited. Of course, she walked up to her former husband and booted him right in the balls, and once again, this kind of showed you that the true strength of wrestling does come down to its storytelling and really the simple characterization. Even though it was WrestleMania 17, she may have got the biggest pop of the evening. So if you have never seen this, you should check it out today, because I'm not lying, my friends. It is goosebump-inducing stuff. Number 26, Shane's coast-to-coast on Vince McMahon at WrestleMania 17. So this is from the very same match, and once again, Vince and Shane taking each other on shouldn't have been good, but it is damn entertaining. This one also blew any fan's mind that had been watching for a long time, because at WrestleMania 17, the granddaddy of them all, Shane McMahon went to the top rope and essentially hit the Van Terminator on his own father in front of millions and millions of people. Of course, Shane O'Mac called his the coast to coast, so this got even worse, because Vince had a trash can wedged between his chin, and I would imagine took quite the whack here. Given that we've heard plenty of stories of Vince McMahon telling other talent as well they have to hit him as hard as possible, well, once again, I will direct your eyes to YouTube, and you can watch this for real. Shane McMahon does not hold back. In fact, he throws himself in so hard, it's amazing he doesn't get a concussion, because my gosh, he smashes his skull into the floor. This hardcore match really was wild. It sort of ties in Shane McMahon's entire WWE run though, because he has a bunch of special bumps like this, but given that we had all the family drama and infighting, and because it went down at WrestleMania 17, this one has to be right up there. Number 25, Edge spears Mick Foley through a flaming table at WrestleMania 22. So there was a time when Mick Foley decided he didn't have enough WrestleMania moments. And now when we do go back through the history books, my goodness, he has dozens of them. This is one of the reasons he wanted to come back to WrestleMania 22 to work Edge, because for starters, he saw something in the young Adam Copeland, and two, he thought he had something special left in him, and he was totally right. Given that Lita was on the outside managing the rated R superstar, she does indeed get a match and light a table on fire, and because Foley was on the ring apron, Edge looks at him and decides, I'm going to spear you to the floor, and they do indeed set themselves on fire. What the flub are we doing? Joey Styles on commentary loses his mind during this, and I'm not surprised, and go and watch Edge sell this afterwards. He is not pretending, my friends, he is quite literally ablaze. The bump was replayed time and time again for years because of course it was, and it is a true hardcore classic of the WrestleMania age. How Mick Foley was able to do this time and time again, I don't know, and let's not forget what it did for Edge. He totally reinvented himself after this, and fans looked at him like, oh my gosh, he's crazy. So it really is tremendous stuff, even though it is super duper whooper brutal. But as ever, Mick Foley knew what he wanted to do, and he pulled it off effortlessly. Number 24, the Hardys showed up unannounced at WrestleMania 33. So this one was absolutely awesome because the night before, the Hardys were working a Ring of Honor show where they had taken on the Young Bucks. I'm not sure anybody thought we'd get to the next day and bam, Matt and Jeff were going to be back in the WWE. It was just so well done too, because this was at WrestleMania 33 when the New Day were the hosts, and given that we did have a ladder match featuring the Good Brothers Enzo Amore and Big Cass in the bar, they teased that Kofi, Big E and Xavier Woods may be about to enter that bout. Instead, they pointed at the entranceway, that familiar Hardy Boys music hit, and just go look at this sea of people, they simultaneously all lose their mind. It really is one of the best surprise pops you could ever hope to see, just because I don't think anybody expected this. Let's also throw in there that the Hardy Boys are just WWE royalty. I mean, they changed the game back in the day. We wouldn't have half the things we have today without them. Vince McMahon knew this as well because he had Matt and Jeff win the Raw Tag Team titles, and once again, every single person in that crowd just jumped up and went, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe it." The fact that as I'm talking to you, we recently found out that the Hardys are going to be back in NXT. Well, I would imagine they have one last little WWE run before they get inducted into the Hall of Fame. And if you need any visual proof, you have to go back to WrestleMania 33. It is a true amazing moment. Number 23, WrestleMania meets the ladder match at WrestleMania 10. So sometimes real-life backstage heat can create on-camera wizardry. Shawn Michaels had fallen out with the WWE Chiefs after refusing to agree to a suspension, and he basically left with the Intercontinental title in late 1993. Of course, the company had to proceed, so they gave that title to Razor Ramon, and all of a sudden HBK was back. So that begged the question, what the flub do we do now? Well, Vince McMahon, always looking for the opportunity, decided we should find out who was the rightful Intercontinental Champion. The way we were going to do that was by taking both of these championships and hanging them above a ladder at WrestleMania 10. In case you are making notes for your history books, yep, this is the first ever WWF pay-per-view ladder bout. Now, of course, if you go back and watch it today, you probably won't understand the gravitas, but as the ladder gimmick was still in its infancy, some of the things that Shawn and Razor did, well, it made you terrified right down in your Tootsie Toes. You can also tell that the ladder is not one that they use today because it threatened to break a few times, but thankfully that didn't happen. It also allowed Shawn Michaels to climb to the top of it and hit this massive splash. And again, we have seen that in video package after video package. It was considered huge. You get a really nice finish as well because the bad guy does become the Intercontinental Champion, and that's what everybody wants. As a small aside, Scott Hall never became a world champion, and that was nonsense. He had the chops. Even Bret Hart, who was the person who pitched the ladder match to WWF in the first place, watched this and went, you know what, you made the right call. And in terms of introducing a brand new gimmick that was going to be used 30 years later, well, you can't do worse than this. It is a pretty damn good match. Number 22, the Mega Powers explode at WrestleMania 5. So many a time, people will sit down and discuss what are the best stories in the WWF history books. Well, I do believe this has to be one of them. It all started when Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage became the Ultimate Tag Team in 1988. And I tell you, for the entire year and into 1989, they essentially dominated. Unfortunately, by Survivor Series, the cracks were beginning to appear, because as the Macho Man would claim, that damn Hulkster, he has lust in his eyes for my Miss Elizabeth. So yeah, their split was going to come in February because of jealousy. I mean, that's a tale we can all relate to. When it finally did happen, fans were totally shocked by this, especially because it did mean at WrestleMania 5, we were going to do Hulk Hogan versus the Macho Man Randy Savage. That's like Superman versus Batman. But hopefully not as dark as that movie. This was also coming off the back of WrestleMania 4, which did feel a little bit drab. And I tell you, while there is 14 belts on this card, there's only one that does stand out, and that's because everybody was waiting for Hogan versus Savage. It also meant the Macho Man was able to return to his heel roots, and he was the perfect foil for Hulk. And even though Hogan would go on to recapture his WWF Championship, this just felt so big. It also had one of the best builds to any WrestleMania main event ever, and Miss Elizabeth played her part too. I mean, the amount of context and everything else they used, well, I don't think there's two ways about it. This is a flipping classic. Number 21, Mike Tyson decks HBK at WrestleMania 14. I think Eric Bischoff probably had the best summary of this when he did find out that Mike Tyson had signed with the WWF in 1998. He watched that episode of Raw and thought to himself, oh man, I think WCW is screwed. Now, every single thing that Tyson did on TV was excellent, from the push-apart brawl with Stone Cold Steve Austin to revealing that he had joined Degeneration X. Why, Mike, why? Of course, it was all done to stack the odds against Stone Cold as he rolled into WrestleMania 14 to try to win his first WWF title. It actually turned out to be a ruse, even though Iron Mike was installed as a special guest enforcer. As soon as Austin had hit the stunner, he flew in there, he counted to 3, he revealed a Steve Austin shirt, and those two probably danced until the cows came home. We really got the most out of this too, though, because of course an irate Michaels got in Tyson's face after this, and what did Mike do? He punched him right in the jaw and knocked him out. After all, he was meant to be a boxer. In terms of what we saw on screen as well, this had huge ramifications. Shawn Michaels had to take time off for his back injury, but in terms of what you'd seen on TV, it looked like Mike Tyson had killed him. It also ended with Tyson draping an Austin 316 shirt over HBK, and let's face it, he was about to start his era of dominance and we were never going to look back. Given that Mike Tyson was involved, this got mainstream coverage as well and helped kickstart the Attitude Era. So you really can't fault it, my friends, and without it, who the flub knows where we would be today. That is me checking out for now, so I appreciate you hanging around, and I'm gonna throw it back to Andy. Bald Brothers for life.
Thank you once again, my very good friend, and we're getting into the big boy territory now. Here we go. Number 20, the Ultimate Challenge favors Warrior, WrestleMania 6. Vince McMahon probably needed some throat sweeties after performing the gravelly voiceover for WrestleMania 6's Ultimate Challenge between Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior. He was in OTT hype mode for the studio session, but he sold this babyface versus babyface collision with gusto by ranting and raving about the powerful forces in the cosmos, like his life depended on it. This match was carefully constructed with several simple receipts. 1 minute, Hulk was shoving Warrior down. The next, Hogan ended up on his big tan behind himself. Cleverly, a few double downs also permeated the proceedings and added to the swelling drama amongst the fans. Just who was going to win this match? Out of the iconic WWE good guy Hulk or the new steroid monster on the block Warrior? Someone was going to have to win, and soon the people would have their answer. It was Warrior, baby. Hulk Hogan might not have wanted to publicly admit it, just like he doesn't want to publicly admit being a racist these days, but he definitely needed a bit of a breather by 1990. It is impossible to curse WWE for deciding to move in a fresh new direction with Warrior, or for simply seeing the burgeoning popularity of the Warrior and how this could maybe become Vince's next ticket to making millions and millions of dollars heading into the next decade. Now, things did not quite work out that way, as we know, because Warrior was a complete maniac and Hulk was back in the saddle later that year, but WWE at least had to try. The Ultimate Challenge is a classic. It does not get much more iconic than this. And it did feel in the moment like WWE had maybe found their next Hulk Hogan in the Warrior. That of course did not pan out long term, but it doesn't matter. This is still one of the most must-see main events in the event's rich history, whether you are into that particular era or not. Number 19, TLC 2 raises the bar, WrestleMania 17. WrestleMania 10's first pay-per-view ladder match between Shawn Michaels and Razor Ramon seemed archaic next to the wild bump fest, like this match right here. Of course, by SummerSlam 2000, we got the first TLC match. This was a story of frankly insane tag teams constantly upping the ante. And at WrestleMania 17, we got the craziest TLC yet. Now, all the painful bumps taken in these matches would of course result in injuries and strip time away from careers later on, but the 6 wrestlers involved in this match, actually 9 if you involve all the extras, would tell you that at the time, those bumps were worth it to achieve wrestling immortality. Heading into WrestleMania 17, fans were split on whether or not Edge and Christian, Matt and Jeff, Bubba Ray or Devon could top their original match with an action-packed TLC sequel. And they did. They basically multiplied it by about 5. The sense of anticipation in the building before this match happened was so thick, you couldn't cut it with a knife. You need a chainsaw or something. People at ringside were practically salivating over the thought of the car crash stunt show that was about to happen that would make an already dazzling card even brighter. Few ladder matches these days are considered surefire timeless classics before they happen, mostly because they seem to happen every single month. But in 2001, things were different. Viewers hadn't yet become burned out on these same old spots. Seeing this trio of hungry tag teams and all their managers and stuff risk it all and put their bodies on the line just to improve on SummerSlam's first TLC match was breathtaking. And then, one spot in particular came along to etch its place in the annals of time as one of WWE's most replayed moves. And that is number 18, Edge's spear on Jeff Hardy, WrestleMania 17. This was something else. Edge and Jeff Hardy had to get every single movement of their banner spot bang on, or they'd be risking serious injury or worse. They could have easily broken their necks doing this. There's no way to escape that simple fact. Pain was incoming. The eager-to-please pair just had to try and mitigate the amount of agony that they'd experienced from falling from such a terrifying height. Jeff was trying to pull down one of the tag team title belts when a ladder was kicked out from underneath him. He was hanging on from dear life and he started flailing his legs, kicking out, trying to haul the belt down. So you have to give these guys serious credit. Jeff had to balance swinging around like a madman between being still enough for Edge to pick his spot. And similarly, Edge had to make sure he timed his jump absolutely perfect while Jeff was still swinging towards him. It would still hurt, but at least they'd hurt together. Jeff ended up up taking a hellish back bump, but Edge pretty much took a faceplant DDT off the ladder himself. It was a truly ballsy spot, yet probably a bit silly, but one that was performed as safely as they possibly could have, and a really iconic moment nonetheless. Number 17, Ricky Steamboat and Randy Savage give WrestleMania a classic, WrestleMania III. Look, from day one, the goal of WrestleMania was not 5-star matches. The goal was to put on a crazy all-star extravaganza, the most ostentatious, loud and brash show that Vince McMahon could possibly concoct, with celebrity appeal, casual fans, all of that stuff, in order to make wrestling bigger than ever before and appeal to a broader audience. The WWF of 1987 just wasn't out there saying, hey brother, go and have a technical classic. Even though if you go through the annals of history, yeah, there's a lot of good stuff there. It just wasn't always the focus. Savage vs. Steamboat was an NWA caliber match in the theatre of sports entertainment. Macho Man and the Dragon took it upon themselves to produce what was the best WrestleMania match up to that point. Literally nothing had come close to this IC title classic, and agents still found a way to cram some spots of entertainment value in there, mostly by having George the Animal Steele around ringside. Macho Man and Steamboat went about their business like the rent was due. They tore into one another and had a clash so fun-filled that even Chris Jericho played it out move for move with family members and friends in his living room, which is a pretty wacky visual in 2025. A great match with a great finish between two great wrestlers, and it still holds up today. Number 16, Brock Lesnar beats The Streak, WrestleMania 30. It's actually said that if you visit the Superdome today in 2025, you might still find a gang of shocked WWE fans standing in the bleachers, mouths agape, at The Undertaker's first WrestleMania loss. The rapidly growing social media age back in 2014 meant that several fans became internet famous overnight due to their stunned facial expressions when Brock Lesnar pinned The Undertaker, ended a WrestleMania winning streak, and put the one in 21-1. The ride was over, the undefeated streak was gone, and it took some getting used to. And look, there will always be people who will despise the idea that this made the top 100 or even the top 20 here. After all, a lot of people still consider it a mistake, and they argued that Brock didn't need the win. And sure, it's pretty fair actually that Lesnar didn't need to beat Undertaker, but it's what WWE wanted at the time. They thought it was time to beat the dead man on the show of shows and move him into the final chapters of his epic career. Time has been a little bit kinder to this shocking moment. Go back in and soak all of it in right now. It was like every last breath of air had been vacuumed out of the Superdome in an instant. Who knew that approximately 65,000 people could be so quiet, right? Paul Heyman screamed with delight at ringside. Brock was booed as he left the building, and then everyone came together to applaud The Undertaker for his incredible record. Unmatched, but no longer unblemished. Many will disagree, but The Undertaker had to put somebody over in this spot sometime before he retired, and yeah, maybe a younger wrestler might have benefited from it, but if you look at how WWE pushed Brock afterwards, you can't criticize the follow-through. They did what they needed to do with the win, and so it panned out. Number 15, end of an era, WrestleMania 28. Hell in a Cell matches in huge stadium shows are always a bit of a risk. Some of the suffocating claustrophobia of the cell itself is lost when the normally imposing structure looks tiny inside a cavernous venue, but WWE did not have that issue at WrestleMania 28, perhaps because of the people who were in the match. Triple H, The Undertaker, and Shawn Michaels, who was a special guest referee. This was billed as an end-of-an-era battle between two greats of the Attitude Days. Jim Ross was even brought back on commentary to sit in and add extra weight to the narrative. Good old JR was on top of his game for this one, and that gravitas combined with the melodrama of Triple H, The Undertaker, and Shawn Michaels made the announcing legend have a superb performance and a superb spectacle to narrate. People remember this Hell in a Cell effort fondly for Shawn's performance as the referee, the seemingly impossible near falls, and the general level of chemistry that seemed to get even more impressive the longer they wrestled. By the end, they'd achieved their goal. They had taken everybody on a ride through Attitude's greatest hits and put a bow on it that perfectly tied up that period of WWE history. Triple H ended up gifting Undertaker a framed picture of these three warriors looking back to soak up the acclaim after the fact. The Undertaker was pretty damn grateful for that, and the photo still takes pride of place in his house today. End of an era it may have been, but it's an ending that people will remember forever. Number 14, Kofi Mania, WrestleMania 35. This is one of the best WrestleMania memories that came close to not happening. In 2019, Kofi Kingston generally wasn't in Vince McMahon's thoughts, certainly not as a foe for the freshly turned environmentalist heel Daniel Bryan. Then, then fate came along and said, hey buddy, change your plans. Mustafa Ali was struck down by an injury before a gauntlet match in February. He was going to be in the picture at the time, but WWE had to pivot away, so instead the fans decided that it was time to strap a rocket to Kofi Kingston. Enough was enough, they said. It's time for Kofi Mania to take flight and for Kofi to be world champion. Okay then, WWE replied. Kofi Mania was born, but everything else had to fall in place for that to become a reality. Luckily, Daniel Bryan was the perfect champion for Kingston to dethrone. WWE knew that Bryan was one of the best wrestlers of all time and would do absolutely everything he could to make the win even better. Come WrestleMania 35, that's precisely what one of the GOATs did as soon as he laced his boots. Those fears from fellow New Day members Big E and Xavier Woods were 100% genuine. Emotions were high in watching the audience as well, partly because everyone could tell that this was likely going to be Kofi's only chance to live up to his early potential and become a top champion in the WWE. But like any good Hollywood tearjerker, WWE let happiness fry. They decided to give everybody a gift so happy and so warming, it felt like your heart was going to burst through your chest. Even Bryan himself probably had to fight back a smile as he watched Kingston lose his mind, raising the WWE title high above his head. This will always be viewed as one of the most joyous moments in WrestleMania lore, and I might go and watch it now. Well, I mean after the video, but you know. Number 13, the era of Stone Cold begins at WrestleMania 14.
Stone Cold! Stone Cold! Stone Cold!
I'm really sorry, that was a terrible impression, but it was meant to be Jim Ross roaring himself silly when his real-life buddy Steve Austin won the WWF title for the very first time at WrestleMania 14. And again, I cannot stress how sorry I am for that impression. Jim's reaction was so real and in the pocket that his partner Jerry Lawler had to step in and add some storyline context by pointing out that Mike Tyson had effectively turned his back on DX leader Shawn Michaels in the process. That snake. Jim Ross and millions of other Stone Cold supporters didn't give a damn about that, because as soon as Tyson's hand slapped the mat 3 damn times, they were wrapped up in Austin fever, and everybody could see that this was the dawn of a new age for the Fed. Meanwhile, Michaels, who had worked the match in agony due to a back injury suffered in the Royal Rumble, made his way to the exit doors and wouldn't work another lick until 2002, but he'd done his job here. The era of Austin 316 was fully underway, and afterwards, to draw a line under his beef with Tyson, Steve chucked Iron Mike a t-shirt that the boxing great gladly raised high. Then, as we talked about earlier on, Tyson clogged HBK with a nasty right hook before the WWF toasted their new poster boy, Steve Austin. Granted, the match itself probably could have been a little bit better, but Shawn's back was killing him at this stage. The most important thing at the end of the day was that Austin had seized control of the title and, in the process, taking control of WWE's main event picture. Oh, and you know, Mike Tyson being involved, major celebrity, that didn't exactly hurt from a casual fan point of view either. Number 12, HBK retires Ric Flair, WrestleMania 24. I'm sorry, I love you. That's what Shawn Michaels told Ric Flair right before putting him down for the count with one last super kick at Mania 24. In storyline, WWE's announcers acted like Shawn was putting a beloved family pet out of its misery, and it was ultimately an act of kindness so that everyone could remember the good times without a bitter end. Now, Rick had initially said that it would be an honor to have Michaels retire him, but grew animated and agitated when everybody in kayfabe, including Shawn, that it was definitely gonna happen. Shawn Michaels was gonna beat your ass, old man, and give you the old yeller treatment. But that old nature boy spirit rushed to the surface, and it gave the match an extra bit of juice. Vince McMahon deciding on TV that Flair's next loss would be his last heightened the drama as well, and this is perhaps actually the most melodramatic match in WWE history, and that does make it quite divisive. But in WWE canon, it's also pretty damn iconic and one of the more memorable retirement matches in history. If only that retirement had actually stuck. But WWE nonetheless went all out to make this 2008 affair feel like a curtain call, and they could not have handpicked anybody better than HBK to do the honors and make sure things went off without a hitch. Flair was crying his eyes out as Shawn pinned him for the victory. In fact, he was weeping long before that. His call to wrestle even more matches on a Hulk Hogan tour and in TNA/elsewhere definitely blunts the sharpness of this moment, but doesn't outright shatter the moment itself. If you take it in a vacuum, it still stands up. Number 11, the boyhood dream comes true, WrestleMania 12. There's no denying that Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels tried to be a bit too ambitious by working a full 60-minute Iron Man matches without a single fall to break things up at WrestleMania 12. They probably should have put some numbers on the board, but you know, egos are powerful things, especially when you can't stand the other guy in the ring with you. The lack of pins, submissions, and other decisions has colored opinion on this Iron Man match over the years, which I think is fair. But the finish itself was unrivaled drama for the era. On-screen, WWF President Gorilla Monsoon decreed that the bout had to go on after ending 0-0, much to the chagrin of Bret Hart. Then Shawn blasted him with some sweet chin music to take the thing 1-0 when it mattered the most. Vince McMahon's call on commentary in the afterglow became iconic. The boyhood dream has come true, he said. WWE would go on to use that line along with the accompanying footage of Shawn staring longingly at the belt hundreds, if not thousands of times in the future. And you can expect to see it again every single time WrestleMania rolls around and WWE make one of them sweet ass highlight videos they do. This main event splits opinion. It was overly ambitious in terms of meat and potatoes wrestling over the expected panache, but it does boast one of the more pleasing conclusions to any world title story in living memory. Shawn's boyhood dream was real. Finally, it was real. Over to you, Gareth.
Andy H. Murray once again supplying the all-important hot tag. Now it's down to me to not crap the bed with the finish. No pressure. Number 10, Shawn Michaels has to retire WrestleMania 26. Individual taste dictates whether you prefer the first Shawn Michaels vs Undertaker match at WrestleMania 25 or the sequel at 26. Obviously, this wasn't the first time those legends had tangled, full stop, but it was something new for WrestleMania. Some like the original better, whilst others adored that WWE heaped on HBK's retirement stip heading into the all-or-nothing rematch. It'll come as no surprise to either camp that both cracked the top 10 here. Shawn was tortured by his inability to beat Taker at 25. He lobbied for a rematch, was denied, then took matters into his own hands by ending his rival's world title reign inside the Elimination Chamber. He's just a driven boy. Yeah, it doesn't have the same ring to it. Chris Jericho won the belt inside the chamber, then Michaels and Taker settled terms on one final encounter in 2010. That'd proved to be Shawn's last match until a regrettable one-night return for a sweet payoff in 2018, one that we'd all like to forget ever happened. A third, leaping-style tombstone piledriver marked the site of HBK's full-time career grave in Arizona. Undertaker went to 18-0. Shawn laid his utterly brilliant second stint between 2002 and 2010 to rest, and WWE knew they'd have some job on their hands to replace his in-ring quality going forwards. Some others on the roster would have to step up their game, put it that way. The Undertaker giving Michaels a taste of his own medicine just 2 years after HBK had ended Ric Flair's own career, or so he thought, was honestly sensational stuff. This result would also come back up in the chat once Shawn was announced as special guest ref for Taker vs Triple H at Mania 28. Again, 2 years later. These Hall of Famers worked perhaps the greatest back-to-back Mania matches ever. Two other lads could throw their names into that argument though. Number 9, Cody Rhodes finishes his story, WrestleMania 40. He could have assembled an army to march on WWE HQ after Mania 39's main event. There, Cody Rhodes looked totally distraught after losing to Roman Reigns, and social apps burned brightly with rage for weeks after the match. How could Triple H fumble the best babyface of a generation, they wrote, or tweeted, or X'd. Everyone demanded answers, but Trips made them wait for the payoff. 1 year later, Cody eventually toppled Reigns at Mania 40 to become the new WWE champion. And all that pain his fans suffered through in 2023 was suddenly worth it. 2024 belonged to the American Nightmare. Nobody would have circled his name as a Roman beater when he was riding high as a leading face over in AEW. I mean, that seemed inconceivable at one time, but it happened. Such is the magic of WrestleMania, people. WWE brought the big guns out for Cody vs Roman too. The Rock, Seth Rollins, John Cena, and even The Undertaker all showed up and got involved. Steve Austin was supposed to be there too, but Taker was a fine last-minute substitute for Stone Cold. It was fine, I'm over it. Yeah, right. Everybody had their brief moment. Then Rhodes grabbed his chance and got one of the biggest pops ever by ending Roman's reign at the top of the card. He had finally finished his story and honored the memory of his late late father, Dusty. I'm gonna start crying again. Recency bias claims may pour in when you see this rank so high. Yes. But honestly, screw that. It's one of the most moving things I have ever witnessed in this great sport. Cody becoming WWE champion and celebrating like a true hero was just excellent, and it was honestly worth the 12-month postponement. Number 8, Icon vs. Icon, WrestleMania 18. WWF bigwigs knew exactly what their poster for Mania 18 was gonna be as soon as The Rock and Hollywood Hogan confirmed they'd be locking horns in Toronto. Icon vs. Icon was the war cry a full 12 years on from Hogan's incredible Ultimate Challenge versus the Ultimate Warrior in the same Skydome venue. And both workers had as many goosebumps rippling across their skin as the fans watching. Literally everybody knew this was the biggest attraction on the card. But Vince McMahon went with Triple H beating Chris Jericho for the undisputed title as the headliner instead. Now, was that a mistake? I vote yes. Okay, Hunter's return in front of an impassioned MSG the prior January had been popular, but there is no doubting that Hulk vs. Rocky would have rocked if going on last. But in truth, the match hogged the spotlight regardless of placement anyway. A standoff on Raw had been blood-pumping stuff before the match took place. Then in Toronto, fans created a wall of noise as Hogan and The Rock came face to face. Honestly, the duo could have stood there for an eternity and heard the same dueling chants. For the record, those dueling chants quickly gave way to predominant Hulk bias. The meal ticket was back, folks, and WWF fans were ready for him. It says everything for these guys that simply standing still inside the ring, staring at one another, created a WrestleMania moment for the ages. What occurred next somehow increased volume further inside the dome. That seemed like a far-fetched idea considering the commotion before either man touched, but that's what happened, baby. Before we go any further, I want to know right now, what do you think is the greatest WrestleMania match of all time? It doesn't matter what you... No, I'm kidding. It does matter. That's why I asked the question, so let me know in the comments. Number 7, Hogan hulks up in Hollywood colors, WrestleMania 18. Sticking with the Icon vs. Icon classic, technically, this wasn't the old WWF Hulk Hogan here. It was the NWO's Hollywood version that The Rock wrestled at Mania 18. Not for long, admittedly. According to both, they called some on-the-fly audibles and adjusted their match to meet responses from fans in attendance. Now yes, that could be yet more Hogan hyperbole, but it would make sense when taking in one of the bout's banner spots. Rock started beating on Hulk to no avail. Then Hogan performed his usual Hulk up routine as the audience stood with him. So if Rocky was supposed to be the babyface and Hogan the heel, then that wouldn't have been smart, right? So did they call this in the heat of the moment? Does anyone really care? All that matters is the end result, and that result was special. Toronto cheered like it was the mid-1980s all over again. In short, Hogan became the old red and yellow incarnation live before everyone's eyes mid-match. He was still wearing the black and white New World Order colors, but it was like someone had tipped red and yellow paint cans all over him. Put simply, the Hulk up moment caused quite the stir. Now look, it is easy to palm off Hogan's impact due to real-world events, regrettable statements, or his preposterous need to tell fibs aplenty, but rewatching 2002's event reveals that there was definitely more gas in the tank at this point. WWF fans love seeing their old favorite bring back the glory days versus The Rock, flexing and pointing his way back into their hearts for a bit. Number 6, Taker's face when HBK kicked out WrestleMania 25. The power of close-up facial expressions should never be ignored, folks. WWE's production team has greatly benefited from waving goodbye to Kevin Dunn's erratic camera angle changes and other idiosyncrasies. But the much maligned Dunn was at the helm back in 2009 when cameras captured one masterful sell job from The Undertaker at Mania 25. Somewhat ironically, the dead man looked like he'd spotted a ghost when Shawn Michaels kicked out of his tombstone piledriver late in the bout. That near fall had everybody fooled. But it became even better for Taker acting like he was fresh out of ideas. If that wouldn't put HBK down for the count, then what would? Catching Shawn on a moonsault attempt and turning it into another tombstone might do the trick. Just a thought. WWE's cams zoomed right in on Taker's face to capture every single movement for that cell, though. Intelligently, the legend stared a hole right through space in disbelief. He didn't try to do too much or dart his eyes around the venue looking for answers, like a lot of folks graduating from the PC right now. No, Taker remained transfixed on the fact Shawn had survived yet again. It was one of the best facial performances in pro wrestling history. That's a sentence I didn't think I'd be saying today. A few naysayers in the wild have tut-tutted at the number of finishers Taker and Michaels powered out of. And yeah, fair enough, but they weren't rushing through anything. Besides, this was WrestleMania and a true battle of the titans. It had to go above and beyond to ensure people talked about their clash like some mythical war between gods. Dramatic, sure, but then that was the point, no? Number 5, Randy and Liz reunite, WrestleMania 7. WrestleMania 7's retirement match between Randy Savage and the Ultimate Warrior was a super slick display in how one or two background story beats can make the segment even better. Before the bell, Bobby Heenan said he'd spotted Miss Elizabeth in the crowd. WWF cameras caught Liz looking on concerned, which was interesting. Her romance with Savage had broken down, but here she was on hand for a potentially career-ending Macho Man occasion. That one reveal sold the love these two people still had for one another without either saying a word. Warrior entered arguably his finest in-ring performance opposite Savage, then took his leave after winning. That then gave sensational Sherry the floor to attack Randy for losing, which in turn caused Elizabeth to leave her seat and get physical for one of the first times ever. She just couldn't sit back and watch Savage get professionally heartbroken, then personally abused by somebody who was clearly using him. Liz cried after that, and Savage embraced her. It was heartfelt, genuine, and just lovely to see such a thing happen on a wrestling show. The couple's relationship might have been strained behind the scenes, but WWF fans dearly wanted to see them back together on camera in 1991, and the company made that a reality at WrestleMania. This led to a memorable wedding on pay-per-view at SummerSlam 91, and would be one of the last hurrahs Randy and Liz enjoyed together on screen in the Federation. Gooey romance novel stuff like this should not have worked as well as it did on a cartoonish wrestling show like the WWF's, but fan sentiment towards Miss Elizabeth and Savage was legit. They loved them and wanted to see them happy together. Number 4, Daniel Bryan beats everybody, WrestleMania 30. Whether they wanted to or not, they really didn't. Even WWE bosses had to admit that Daniel Bryan's popularity amongst fans was something quite unique as 2013 gave way to a new year. It was also worth capitalizing on come the most lucrative quarter on the calendar. So once CM Punk thumbed his nose at the McMahons and walked out in early 2014, it was all systems go on Bryan's Mania 30 sprint. Oh wait, no it wasn't. Batista was the plan, not Bryan, because of course it was. It took ceaseless fan pressure to force WWE into seeing what everybody else could. Dan was the man, and he offered a longer-term strategy than Big Dave. Batista was dancing back to Hollywood following a short run anyway, and that fan pressure ultimately led to Bryan beating Triple H in the opening match at Mania, then winning the WWE title in a three-way battle with Batista and Randy Orton in the main event. The Yes Movement wasn't some carefully created WWE marketing ploy. It was a real thing, a groundswell of support built and built for Bryan. Then Vince McMahon, Triple H, and others just had no choice but to go along for the ride. It felt like a victory for pro wrestling and pro wrestling fans when Daniel held the WWE's top prize aloft as confetti fell and pyro exploded in New Orleans. Select fans also reminisced about Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit doing the same thing 10 years before. Less so the latter, for obvious reasons. 2014's annual showcase belonged to one of the greatest pure technicians to ever grace WWE rings. The people demanded it. The people made it happen. The people got it. Yes! Number 3, Steve Austin won't quit, WrestleMania 13. Bloody wrestlers desperately fighting to stay conscious wasn't something that WWF put in front of fans a whole hell of a lot back in 1997. The Attitude Era hadn't properly kicked off yet. There had been little glimmers of a different direction on programming throughout late 1996 into 97, but blood-soaked canvases weren't exactly frequent. That's one of the reasons why Steve Austin's enduring image at Mania 13 was so epic. Stone Stone Cold charmed the entire fanbase by fighting tooth and nail to keep surviving Bret Hart's deadly sharpshooter towards the end of their no DQ submission-based match. Claret trickled down his forehead into his eyes, nose, and mouth as Austin grimaced, then roared in pain before succumbing to the overwhelming strain of it all. He did his best. Guest ref Ken Shamrock awarded the win to Bret, but a star was born. Austin was the real winner here. This was something fresh for WrestleMania's glitzy, child-friendly, dreams-come-true atmosphere. Vince McMahon was willing to let Austin and Hart do their own thing. He trusted Bret in particular to come up with something that'd get people talking, and footage of Steve passing out in agony as blood poured from his wounds onto the WWF mats has become legendary for a reason. It portrayed Austin as the toughest wrestler on the planet, the toughest person in general. Truthfully, that's not the only moment worth pinpointing from WrestleMania 13's best match, and arguably the best match in Mania history. There was another side to the submission finish that's well worth heralding as one of the famous series' most significant achievements. So, number 2, the double turn of a lifetime, WrestleMania 13. If Steve Austin looked like a tough guy cowboy who'd never willingly quit when there was still breath in his aching body, then Bret Hart looked every bit the miserable git veteran who traded in his heroic cape for a supervillain snarl. The fact Bret was able to go from concrete good guy to detestable piece of crap in one solitary match is a tribute to his legendary skills. Few could have carried off WrestleMania 13's double turn as well as Bret and Austin. WWE has tried other double turns over the decades, but none have caught fire quite as well as Stone Cold becoming the rebellious anti-hero babyface, and the Hitman becoming a twisted stalwart who felt he wasn't getting enough respect. Bret was battling against an ever-changing business that didn't sit well with his core values, and that plot point screamed in your ear when watching the conclusion to this no DQ match with Austin. Putting Ken Shamrock in there as the special guest referee / enforcer was a shrewd choice too. He was neutral and carried a real sports aura that fans could take seriously. Around him, the WWF cast gritty action heroes that were more like characters from an 18+ rated movie than the walking cartoons of wrestling in the mid to late 90s. This may always be the greatest double turn ever. Like, how do you beat this? Austin passed out in a pool of his own blood. Bret lined him up for that match-winning sharpshooter by smashing Steve with the ring bell. And then Hart looked absolutely disgusted by the fact fans were showing reverence towards someone who cursed, flashed middle fingers, and had promised to make his life a living hell. Stellar stuff. And finally, number 1, Hulk slams Andre, WrestleMania III. Here it is, the number 1 WrestleMania moment, and it's something so iconic that it's become part of WWE's fabric. That will never change no matter how hard Hulk Hogan tries to clown himself in the media. The image of him body slamming a gargantuan Andre the Giant will live forever. It squeezed one of the loudest pops ever out of a massive crowd in the old Pontiac Silverdome, and it set the scene perfectly for a Hulk leg drop, then pin to retain the WWF title. The apparently unbeatable Andre had been vanquished. Being honest, the company hoped that fans would forget about some of the Giant's previous defeats, and this wasn't even the first time Hogan had slammed him anyway. However, nothing this huge had happened on such a scale before. Mania 3 was a culture-shifting occasion for the WWF and the industry as a whole. It changed the game and upped expectations for what Vince McMahon's territory-smashing organization could accomplish. They had the biggest star in the business in Hogan, a ruthless boss who'd step on anyone in his way in McMahon, and now they had wrestling fans by the throats. Nobody could take their eyes off what the Fed was doing, especially once they were swept up in the majesty of Hulk slamming Andre, then winning in front of a booming live crowd. It was just epic. Of course, Hulk versus Andre was as basic a headline match as you could ever get bell to bell, but it was still box office. The body slam into leg drop spot was all that really mattered to those watching. It's the prototypical WrestleMania moment, even more so than anything that happened at Mania 1 or 2 beforehand. This is definitely the first thing you think of when somebody says the word WrestleMania. Right, if you've had all the fun checking out this massive 100 greatest WrestleMania moments list right here, then check out this Royal Rumble version that we've done too. You're in for a great time.